Chapter 111. Han Yunqing was tightly held by the female assassin. No matter how she struggled, the female assassin remained unmoved. This group of assassins understood Mu Qinggu very well, yet they were targeting her. Could it be that these assassins had something to do with the 10,000 snake poison that Mu Qinggu was afflicted with? They knew that she was investigating the source of the 10,000 snake poison, so they kidnapped her. Other than this reason, Han Yunqing couldn't think of a second one. She was someone who cherished her life very much. She was able to calmly analyze the situation because she was certain that the female assassin wouldn't kill her. If they wanted to kill her, why would they kidnap her? The female assassin had plenty of opportunities to end her life with one strike. Since it was a kidnapping, they must have a request. Thus, she was temporarily safe. At this moment, Han Yunqing's ears were filled with do-do-do sounds. Not only was there poison on the female assassin's sword, she also hid quite a few poisons on her body. It looked like she was someone who was good at using poison. Her martial arts were also so good. Could it be that she was the leader of Northern Li's spies? Thinking of this, Han Yunqing pretended to struggle. She grabbed the female assassin's arm and used her fingernails to pierce it. Who knew that the female assassin would immediately lower her head and disdainfully taunt, Han Yunqing, put away your little tricks. There's nothing great about it, humph. She knew that Han Yunqing had poisoned her, but she didn't stop her. As she spoke, she glanced at her arm. At this moment, the poison in Han Yunqing's fingernails had already seeped into her skin, but she didn't have any reaction at all. How could this be? Han Yunqing's face was filled with shock. It had to be known that she had used ant poison. It was this medicine that had tormented Han Yuqi until he hovered between life and death. Those who were poisoned would feel intense pain at the beginning. Very quickly, they would feel as if their arm was being bitten by thousands of ants. The person wouldn't die from the poison, but they would be clawed until they were neither human nor ghost, living a life worse than death. However, not only did this female assassin not feel any pain, her arm was still so strong, holding her tightly. That was impossible. One had to know that in ancient times, ant poison could not be extracted. One would only be poisoned if they were bitten by poisonous ants. The ant poison she used was carried in the detoxification system. It was the poison essence extracted from the poisonous ants. Therefore, there was a certain difference between being bitten by a poisonous ant and being bitten by a poisonous ant, and the antidote was also different. In other words, Han Yunqing was the only one who had the antidote for the ant poison. It was impossible for this female assassin to have the antidote. Without the antidote, she actually had no reaction at all. That's strange. Han Yunqing didn't believe it. She clenched her teeth and dug her nails deeper, making the ant poison penetrate faster. But who would have thought that the female assassin was still smiling disdainfully, as if it had nothing to do with her. She didn't even look at her as she borrowed strength from the tree and flew even faster. Could it be? Han Yunqing thought of something and almost blurted it out. Fortunately, she shut her mouth in time. However, her face was pale and very ugly. Immune. The reason why this person didn't have any reaction to the ant poison was most likely because she had immunity against poison. There was a type of person who had immunity against poison, so they wouldn't be poisoned. Those who were born with immunity were few and far between. Even if they were born with it, they would only be immune to one or two types of poison. But for those who were injected with various antibodies to develop immunity, then there was a possibility that they would have immunity against a large type of poison. The same type of poison wouldn't be able to poison her. Injecting antibodies was a modern term. In ancient times, it was called poison nurturing. Modern injecting antibodies to poison were divided into level 1, level 2, and level 3. The higher the level, the higher the immunity and the stronger the poison that they could withstand. Of course, the higher the immunity, the more serious the damage to the body's normal functions. It could even be life-threatening. So no matter if it was research and development or clinical application, it was strictly controlled or even prohibited. Han Yunqing remembered that she had read in an ancient poison manual. In ancient times, poison nurturing was also divided into poison humans, poison corpses and poison goo. Poison humans had a limited lifespan, at most 30 years. They had their own independent personality and were no different from a normal person. They had immunity against low-level poisons such as those that only affected the skin, flesh, hair and other non-fatal poisons. Poison corpses were actually similar to death soldiers. Their lifespan didn't exceed a year. They had immunity against middle-level poisons such as those that affected the bones and blood. As for poison goo, what kind of existence was it? There were very few records in ancient books and Han Yunqing didn't know much about it. She only knew that according to the records, even those high-level poisons that affected the internal organs couldn't do anything to poison goo. Han Yunqing had always felt that ancient poisons were plentiful but the poison arts were far from modern times. The records in ancient poison manuals were most likely just a hypothesis and didn't have the conditions to realize it. Even if it really existed, it could only be an individual case. But who knew that she had underestimated the poison arts of ancient times? Today, she had easily encountered one. Based on the situation of this female assassin, she should be a poison person. The discovery of the 10,000 snake poison and the poison mosquito swarm had already caused Han Yunqing to feel apprehensive. Now that a poison person had appeared, what kind of poison expert was behind the northernly country's spies? Previously, Han Yunqing had suspected that this female assassin was the head of the spies. But now, it seemed that she was just a tool. There must be someone behind her. She had to admit that the opponent was mysterious and valiant. It had somewhat exceeded Han Yunqing's expectations. Of course, Han Yunqing wasn't someone who was easy to deal with. She carried with her a large arsenal of poisons. Was there any need to fear that there wouldn't be enough to deal with this female poison person assassin? She pretended to be discouraged and let go of the female assassin's hand. She coldly questioned, "Who exactly are you? Why did you kidnap me?" The female assassin seemed to be very disdainful of Han Yunqing and even seemed to be dissatisfied. She gave a disdainful snort and didn't answer. "You dare to kidnap me? His Highness Duke of Qin will definitely not let you off." Han Yunqing deliberately provoked while her small hand silently reached into her medical pouch. With a thought, she casually grabbed a handful of bone-eroding powder. Bone-eroding powder, as the name implied, was a poison specially used to corrode bones. Once it entered the bloodstream, it would immediately invade the marrow. "Han Yunqing, do you really think you've become a phoenix? Really, really shameless ah." The female assassin became even more disdainful. She landed on the edge of the cliff and grabbed Han Yunqing tightly, as if wanting to jump down. "It's a so-so. You're about the same," Han Yunqing said very calmly, her gaze sweeping over the wound on the female assassin's arm that she had just scratched out with her fingernails. "You dare to scold me?" The female assassin was enraged. She glared coldly and turned her arm towards Han Yunqing. "How about it?" Han Yunqing coldly provoked. Then, with quick reflexes, the hand holding the bone-eroding powder immediately moved towards the female assassin's wound. But, unexpectedly, the female assassin's vigilance was very high. Almost without thinking, she immediately pushed Han Yunqing away. In a flash, she pulled out her sword and sliced off an entire piece of flesh from her arm. The entire process didn't take more than 10 seconds. So fast. So ruthless. Han Yunqing landed at the side and lost her balance. She fell a few steps and sat on the ground, almost falling off the cliff. As long as she held the female assassin's wound, the poison would definitely be administered. But she had never thought that the female assassin would actually slice off her flesh without hesitation. Wasn't this reaction too fast and too professional? Of course, Han Yunqing, who was sitting on the edge of the cliff, couldn't care so much. She was so frightened that her heart almost stopped beating. She hurriedly got up and wanted to run. But the female assassin instantly closed in and grabbed her collar, roaring angrily, "You slut, go and die." Han Yunqing still wanted to use poison. She could only use poison. But who knew that the female assassin didn't give her any chance and suddenly threw her off the cliff. Ah, only a scream was heard. Following that, the female assassin chased after her. Very quickly, the two figures disappeared into the abyss. Bang! A loud sound rang through the entire general's residence main hall. Long Fei Yi stood high up on the main seat. His face was like black ice and his anger overflowed to the heavens. It was like the sky before a violent snowstorm. Especially that pair of cold eyes, it was so deep that it penetrated people's hearts. Because of his rage, it created a strong pressure. The large main hall seemed to have become smaller. The cold aura intimidated Great General Gu and the heavenly fragrance teahouse's servants to kneel on the ground, not daring to raise their heads. Qin Wangfei was kidnapped. What a serious matter this was. The anger in Long Fei Ye's deep eyes jumped. He didn't realize how angry he was. He was so angry that he couldn't calm down. Since the people who kidnapped Han Yunqing were familiar with Mu Qingguo, then it must be the group of spies from northernly country. Now that Han Yunqing had fallen into their hands, how could she be in good condition? General Mu knew that this matter was serious, but he didn't expect His Highness Duke of Qin to be so angry. At this time, he didn't dare to ask for punishment. The most important thing was to hurry and save the princess. His hands were trembling as he reported, "Your Highness Duke of Qin, Qingguo has already sent people to seal off the entrances to the mountains." She must still be in the mountains. Since those people are kidnapping her, esteemed Wang Fei's life won't be in danger for the time being. Unexpectedly, Long Fei Yi blurted out, "This prince won't allow anyone to touch a single hair on her head." Of course he knew that the spies from northernly country kidnapped Han Yunqing. They didn't want her life, but Han Yunqing had fallen into the hands of those women. How could she not be tortured? That cowardly woman must be scared to death. Hearing His Highness Duke of Qin's words, General Mu was even more stunned. He never expected His Highness Duke of Qin to be so protective of Han Yunqing. For a moment, he didn't dare to speak. It was his son who took her out. If they couldn't find her or something happened to her, then the general's estate wouldn't be able to escape punishment with His Highness Duke of Qin's attitude. "Your Highness, this old official will go to the palace right now and ask His Majesty to transfer troops." General Mu's face was earnest. Searching the mountains required men and horses, so transferring troops was the most effective method. But Long Fei Yi refused. "No need. We can't alarm anyone else about this." Leaving aside the fact that Emperor Tianhui wouldn't agree, Long Fei Yi didn't want to publicize the matter even if he did. This involved the northernly spies, and now the Han family was a suspect. Once the matter was made public, it'd affect his investigation and wouldn't benefit Han Yunqing in the slightest. A complicated look flitted past Long Fei Ye's eyes before he said coldly, "Chu Shifeng, send out all of the solitary enclosure's men and horses to secretly search the mountains for your lordship. Also, take the 2 hostages from the prison cells to the Celestial Fragrance Tea Shop." Was His Highness Duke of Qin preparing to exchange hostages? Now General Mu was even more incredulous. After all, His Highness Duke of Qin had never released any of his captives. But this time, he'd made an exception for the sake of a woman. Actually, Han Yunqing's kidnapping was the perfect opportunity for His Highness Duke of Qin to get rid of this Qin Wangfei. Moreover, it involved the northernly spies, so Emperor Tianhui and the Empress Dowager didn't dare to make things difficult for him. Leaving aside General Mu, even Chu Shifeng couldn't understand. But faced with his master in a fit of anger, he didn't dare to ask a single question. He immediately obeyed his orders and left. Long Fei Yi looked icily at the Celestial Fragrance Tea Shop servants. "Tell your owner that your lordship wants to see him." Guard Shengguan was a capable person, but now that such a big matter had happened, Guard Shengguan was helpless and could not bear the responsibility. His Highness Duke of Qin had already arrived, but there was still no news of the Manor Lord. Guard Shengguan could only brace himself and enter to meet him. As soon as he entered, he saw Long Fei sitting loftily in his seat, his face as cold as a demon. He felt the pressure of a mountain and quickly fell to his knees. This commoner Shengguan Ming greets your Highness Duke of Qin. Guard Shengguan, this prince remembers that you are not the Manor Lord. Long Fei Yi said that he liked the red south peak from the Heavenly Fragrance tea house. Guard Shengguan had offered it several times in the name of the Manor Lord. Reporting to your Highness Duke of Qin, this subordinate is also looking for the Manor Lord. The Manor Lord's whereabouts have always been uncertain. This subordinate has already used all means of contact to search for him, Guard Shengguan reported truthfully. You can't find the Manor Lord? Long Fei Yi raised his brows and asked in return. These words were too meaningful. Guard Shengguan was greatly alarmed and hurriedly expressed his position. Your Highness Duke of Qin, this commoner can fully represent the Manor Lord and fully cooperate with the investigation. All the guards of the tea house have entered the mountains to search. The tea maids, tea servants, 2 tea masters, and all the guards of the South Mountain have been imprisoned and are awaiting your Highness Duke of Qin's personal interrogation. Guard Shengguan was a smart person. He had long expected that His Highness Duke of Qin would suspect the Heavenly Fragrance tea house. In fact, he had been unable to sleep for an entire night. After thinking about it for an entire night, he also suspected that a spy had infiltrated the tea house. Otherwise, such a large group of assassins wouldn't have been able to silently lay in ambush on the mountainside of the South Mountain. Long Fei Yi seemed satisfied with Guard Shengguan's answer. He stood up and said coldly, "Interrogate." The mountain had been sealed off. There was no way the assassins could escape this area. On one hand, Long Fei Yi was secretly searching the mountain. On the other hand, he was also waiting for the other party to state their conditions. Taking hostages meant that they had a request. He wasn't afraid of anything else. He was only afraid that the other party wouldn't make a move. As long as the other party made a move and had a request, he would definitely be able to find Han Yunqing. Of course, if they could uncover the Heavenly Fragrance teahouse's spy, their advantage would be even greater. However, the faster, the better. The longer they delayed, the more Han Yunqing would suffer. Hearing that Long Fei Yi wanted to interrogate, Guard Shengguan let out a sigh of relief. Not daring to delay, he hurriedly led the way. Your Highness Duke of Qin, apart from the tea masters and guards of the South Mountain, everyone else is being held separately. The 2 tea boys and 1 tea girl in Fresh Rain Courtyard don't know what happened on the South Mountain, Guard Shengguan whispered as he walked quickly. In fact, it wasn't just the tea boys and tea girls in Fresh Rain Courtyard who didn't know what happened on the South Mountain. Apart from the people on the South Mountain, everyone else in the Heavenly Fragrance tea house also didn't know what had happened. Guard Shengguan had done a good job of keeping secrets. This trick of his was very useful for interrogation. Long Fei Yi made a soft sound of agreement. That handsome face that angered both men and gods was still very, very cold. His facial features seemed to be frozen, making people wonder if this guy had any expression at all. Guard Shengguan stole a few glances at Long Fei Yi. After waiting for a long time and seeing that he didn't speak, he timidly asked, Your Highness Duke of Qin, who do you want to interrogate first? The people from Fresh Rain Courtyard. Long Fei Yi didn't think and directly answered. As soon as Long Fei Yi arrived at the interrogation room, 2 tea boys were brought in. They were both boys in their early teens and were crying all the way in. As soon as they entered and saw the situation in the room, the 2 children were immediately frightened and couldn't help but bawl loudly. Don't cry. Guard Shengguan said angrily. However, the 2 children didn't stop crying. Instead, they cried even louder and huddled together. Guard Shengguan's forehead was beaded with sweat. Actually, according to his understanding, these two children shouldn't be a big problem. However, this matter was too risky. His Highness Duke of Qin hadn't interrogated them, so he didn't dare to speak carelessly. He stole a glance at His Highness Duke of Qin. Seeing that His Highness Duke of Qin wasn't moving, he could only pull the two children apart and have someone cover their mouths. Once the crying stopped, the room was finally quiet. Don't cry. I'm only going to ask you a few questions. Answer truthfully, or you'll suffer. Guard Shengguan warned. Unexpectedly, Long Feiyi suddenly said, "There's nothing to ask. If you don't confess, I'll drag you out and bury you." At these words, the two children were so frightened that their faces turned white. They had only been crying, but now they started to struggle violently. Guard Shengguan let go of one of the children's mouths. Unexpectedly, the child cried loudly, "Wah! I confess. I confess." Confess? He was going to confess. Qin Wangfei's kidnapping on Nanshan hadn't been made public. What did this child know? What was he going to confess? Could it be that he really was a spy? Guard Shengguan and Mu Qinggu looked at each other in disbelief. Long Feiyi was also somewhat puzzled, but he still didn't say anything. Unexpectedly, the child cried, "I confess. I confess. Sister Bai Lu betrayed eldest Miss Mu. Wah, it was Sister Bai Lu who didn't follow the rules. We didn't know anything, wah." This, Guard Shengguan slapped his head in confusion, but Long Feiyi and Mu Qinggu immediately understood. The tea servant, Bai Lu, had violated the rules and answered many of Mu Qinggu and Han Yunqing's questions. The tea boys had overheard and thought that this was what they were questioning. Long Feiyi pinched his brows with one hand and waved the other. Without saying anything, he motioned for Guard Shengguan to take the children away. Guard Shengguan was baffled. Mu Qinggu hurried over to explain and personally untied the two tea boys. He said in a low voice, "Take them out and comfort them. Bring the tea servant here." Guard Shengguan finally understood after hearing the explanation. As for why Mu Qinggu and Han Yunqing were investigating Mu Luyue, although he was curious, he didn't dare to ask and quickly sent them away. Once the tea servant, Bai Lu, was taken out of the cell, she couldn't help but tremble. She was flustered and didn't know what had happened on Nanshan. She didn't know why Guard Shengguan had imprisoned her. After receiving Her Highness and the young general yesterday, she went to rest. She originally wanted to secretly dispose of the tin of tea leaves, but who knew that before she could do so, she heard that something had happened on Nanshan. All the entrances to the tea house were sealed. Everyone in the tea house was in a panic. Everyone asked around, but no one knew what had happened on Nanshan. Not long after, the guards rushed into the house and took her away by force. No matter how much she begged or cried, the guards didn't tell her why. Last night, she tossed and turned in bed, unable to sleep. No matter how she thought about it, something was wrong. Other than secretly hiding the tin of spring tea left behind by second young Miss Han, she didn't do anything wrong. However, even if the matter of her stealing the spring tea was discovered, it couldn't have caused such a big commotion and sealed off the entire tea house. It was just a tin of tea leaves. After the Han family came to ask about it last time, they didn't come again. Even before Divine Dr. Han was imprisoned and the Han family was defeated, with the Han family's status, it wouldn't be enough for Guard Shengguan to seal off the tea house and search the whole tea house. Bai Lu wasn't an inexperienced tea boy. She had been in the Heavenly Fragrance tea house for nearly 10 years and worked her way up from a tea boy to a tea servant. She was dedicated to serving the rich and powerful. Even if she wasn't smart, she had become smart after hearing so many things. She knew that things weren't that simple. It shouldn't have much to do with that tin of spring tea. However, no matter how much she racked her brains, she still didn't know what wrong she had done to be imprisoned. Other than her, was there someone else who was imprisoned? Were the guards taking her to be interrogated now? Was guard Shengguan going to interrogate her personally? Would they torture her? But what did they want to interrogate her about? Bai Lu was full of uneasiness. When she saw the interrogation door, she couldn't help but shrink back. She whimpered softly, "My two lords, what exactly is going on?" The guards didn't dare to make a sound and directly dragged Bai Lu in. Bai Lu almost fell. When she steadied herself and looked up, she gasped. She saw a godlike man sitting high up in front of her. His face was as cold as frost, and his whole body exuded the intimidating aura of a king. Bai Lu had seen many rich and powerful people, but she had never seen such a noble and domineering man. She was already flustered, and now her mind was blank. This man, who was he? Suddenly, guard Shengguan kicked her legs from behind. Bai Lu knelt down abruptly. Only then did she regain her senses and see guard Shengguan and Mu Qingguo at the side. Guard Shengguan learned from Long Fei Yi and didn't say much. He directly questioned her coldly, "Bai Lu, are you going to confess?" Probing the truth with falsehood, falsehood with falsehood. If Bai Lu was innocent, she wouldn't be able to confess anything even if she wanted to. However, if she knew something, then the result was very exciting. Chapter 113. Confess or not? Hearing this question, Bai Lv's heart skipped a beat. She originally thought that guard Shengguan would at least say something or ask something. This way, she would know what exactly happened and be able to deal with it. But who knew that guard Shengguan's first sentence would be for her to confess? What did she have to confess? Did they know anything? Other than stealing the tea leaves, what else did she have to confess? Bai Lv lowered her head, her heart thumping wildly. She was so nervous. Should she confess? She couldn't help but sneak a glance at the godlike man not far away. Just one glance and she retracted her gaze in horror, her heart almost jumping out of her chest. She didn't know who this man was, but she was certain that this man's identity was very honorable. That was why the young general was waiting so respectfully by the side. Something big must have happened in the tea house. It must have nothing to do with her stealing the tea leaves, right? Are you confessing or not? Guard Shengguan questioned again. I don't know. I don't know anything. Bai Lv blurted out. Her mouth reacted faster than her brain. You don't know? I think you won't shed a tear until you see the coffin. Shengguanji was enraged. He pulled out a long whip from the side and swung it in the air. A "shio" sound was heard. Bai Lv jumped in fright and instinctively covered her ears. She shrank to the side and trembled. Her mind was completely blank. How could she care about thinking so much? No matter how smart she was just an ordinary tea servant. Being frightened like this, tears flowed out immediately. She exclaimed, "Guard Shengguan, spare me. Spare me. Bai Lv, you're a smart woman. You should know that if you confess, you'll be lenient. If you resist, you'll be strict." Guard Shengguan reminded her coldly. Who knew that Bai Lv would surrender as soon as he finished speaking? She trembled, her lips and teeth chattering. I confess. I confess, I'll confess everything. Seeing this, Long Fei Ye's gaze turned cold. He finally sized up this tea servant. Speak. Guard Shengguan was nervous. He didn't expect that she would really confess after being forced. Bai Lu's lips trembled as she watched, unable to utter a complete sentence for a long time. Mu Qingguo was burning with anxiety. He strode over and didn't care about the other party's woman. He grabbed Bai Lu's collar and said angrily, Speak. I stole the customer's tea leaves. Bai Lu's words were intermittent, but before she could finish, Mu Qingguo and Guard Shengguan were stunned. Stealing tea leaves. Mu Qingguo released Bai Lv in shock. Bai Lv could finally breathe normally. She crawled to guard Shangguan's feet and hugged him tightly, begging, "Guard Shangguan, please spare me. I beg you. I'm still hiding that can of tea leaves in my room. It's still unopened. I'll return it to second young Miss Han. I'll go apologize to her. Please spare me." Perhaps, if Bai Lu had been calmer, she would not have confessed. However, how could she remain calm when faced with guard Shangguan's whip? She had never encountered such a terrifying situation. Her thoughts were in a mess and her mind was blank. She could only confess. Guard Shangguan felt really humiliated. He didn't expect that instead of finding out about the Nanshan incident, he would find out about such a scandal. He shook his head and looked at Bai Lu with furrowed brows. He didn't know what to say. Had he been too busy this year and neglected to discipline this bunch of servants? How embarrassing. Guard Shangguan, spare me, spare me. I won't dare to do it again. I really won't. Guard Shangguan. You, shut up. Guard Shangguan was so angry that he suddenly shouted. Bai Lu was so frightened that she immediately quieted down. Guard Shangguan braced himself and looked timidly at Long Fei Yi. Unexpectedly, Long Fei Yi was interested and asked coldly, "You hid second young Miss Han's tea leaves?" Bai Lu only felt that this cold voice was deep and husky and rather pleasant to the ear. It was like the sound of a guqin that could tug at one's heartstrings. She was entranced and didn't realize that Long Fei Yi was asking her a question. "What are you waiting for? His Highness Duke of Qin is asking you a question." Guard Shangguan rebuked angrily. Only then did Bai Lu snap out of her daze and look at Long Fei Yi in disbelief. His Highness Duke of Qin. Heavens, he was actually His Highness Duke of Qin. No wonder this man was as honorable as the god of the night. His Highness Duke of Qin was a man who existed like a god. Bai Lu was stunned once again. She stared blankly at Long Fei Yi and didn't answer for a long time. This gaze reminded Long Fei Yi of Han Yunqing. Only, that woman's eyes were much prettier. Long Fei Yi was extremely annoyed and his expression grew colder and colder. Mu Qingguo knew his temperament and hurriedly asked, "Was second young Miss Han's tea leaves meant to be given to Lu Yue?" "Yes, no." Bai Lu was somewhat incoherent. "Is it true or not?" Mu Qingguo was annoyed. He thought that His Highness Duke of Qin's hatred for love-struck women was reasonable. This servant isn't sure. Second young Miss Han brought those tea leaves over. She forgot to take them when she left. In the past, she would always give the tea leaves she left there to Miss Mu. This time, she left without giving them away. I don't know if she forgot to give them to her," Bai Lu hurriedly explained. Hearing this, Mu Qingguo was shocked and hurriedly asked, "Where are they?" Afraid that Mu Qingguo wouldn't believe her, Bai Lu emphasized, "This servant didn't touch them. They're in this servant's room." Mu Qingguo was both surprised and delighted. He didn't expect to find out something like this. After all, he and esteemed Wang Fei had already given up on finding the poison tea leaves. Who knew that they would find them at this critical juncture? According to their conjecture, the tea leaves that second young Miss Han gave to Lu Yue were most likely poisoned. As long as they could detect the poison in this jar of tea leaves, all the mysteries surrounding the 10,000 snake poison would be easily solved. This accident could be considered a silver lining in the midst of misfortune. Mu Qingguo looked at His Highness Duke of Qin and saw that his complexion was much better than before. Guard Shangguan was listening from the side. Although he didn't know what was going on, he was very quick-witted and immediately ordered someone to find the tea leaves. As for Bai Lu, she was so frightened that she even confessed about the tea leaves. She definitely wasn't a traitor. Guard Shangguan didn't dare to ask His Highness Duke of Qin. He gave Mu Qingguo a look, asking how to deal with her. "Lock her up for now and await trial," Mu Qingguo said seriously. He wasn't referring to the kidnapping case, but the 10,000 snake poison case. If the tea leaves were found to be poisoned, Bai Lu would be a witness. Of course, guard Shengguan didn't know the hidden meaning in his words. Very quickly, the tea leaves that Bai Lu had secretly hidden were found and brought over. It was an oval white porcelain jar about 5 inches tall. There was no label on it and it was sealed very well. Mu Qinggu knew what was going on as soon as he saw the sealed opening. He remembered that Lu Yue had given him many good teas that were sealed like this. Although Mu Qinggu couldn't wait to take the tea leaves to a poisoner for inspection, His Highness Duke of Qin didn't say a word. He could only endure it. After all, finding esteemed Wang Fei was more important. He personally took the jar and checked the seal. After confirming that there were tea leaves inside, he presented it to His Highness Duke of Qin. Guard Shengguan was curious and assumed that His Highness Duke of Qin would say something, but Long Fei Yi didn't say a word. He set the jar of tea leaves aside and rested his slender hand on top of it. His fingers tapped on the lid in a languid, mysterious manner. It was impossible to see through him. After a moment of silence, Long Fei Yi looked at guard Shengguan. Continue the interrogation. Your Highness, the rest of the people are all from the South Mountain. They're all locked up together and were present when esteemed Wang Fei was kidnapped. There was a tea servant who led the way, 2 tea maidens, and 15 guards in charge of the South Mountain area, guard Shengguan reported. Long Fei Yi thought for a while before handing the jar of tea leaves to Chu Shifeng, who was standing by Yuan Yuan's side. Cold, he said, take it back and examine it well. Then he rose to his feet. Since there's so many people, your lordship will go personally. Taking 10,000 steps back, even if the assassins had the skills to hide in the tea plantation, they'd need someone to tip them off. Otherwise, how would they know that Han Yunqing and Mu Qinggu would go to the South Mountain? There had to be a spy among them. He refused to believe that he couldn't find one. While Long Fei Yi was interrogating the culprits himself, the Celestial Fragrance Tea Shop, the General's estate, and the solitary enclosure didn't dare to relax as they searched the barren hills around the tea plantation. But none of them expected the assassins to be hiding in a cave in the middle of the abyss. Han Yunqing lay on the ground, her face pale and covered in sweat. In a daze, she muttered something to herself as if she was having a nightmare. Suddenly, she screamed and sat up abruptly, her eyes opening at the same time. In her dream, she was falling down the abyss until she hit the ground. She woke up with a start and broke out in cold sweat. After calming herself down, Han Yunqing realized that she was in a dark cave. Didn't she fall off the cliff? Didn't she fall to her death? Why was she here? She didn't remember how she fainted. Her memory stopped at the moment when she fell off the cliff. Her professional habit made her look for her medical kit. Luckily, it was still there. Awake. Suddenly, a cold female voice sounded. Han Yunqing felt that the voice was familiar, but she didn't think too much about it and hurriedly turned around. She saw 2 women standing behind her. One was dressed in black with a bandage around her arm. It was the female assassin who kidnapped her. The other was dressed in green with a mask. It was the one who spoke. Although she couldn't see their faces, she could tell that the black-dressed woman was very young and the green-dressed woman wasn't young. She put up her guard and angrily asked, "Who are you people? Why did you kidnap me? You're quite arrogant. This grandaunt hasn't settled the score with you yet." The black-dressed woman angrily walked over. If it wasn't for her master's orders to keep Han Yunqing alive, she would have killed this woman. This slut thought she had some skills in poisoning and dared to poison her. She was simply tired of living. If you have the ability, take off your mask and let this princess consort see what you look like. Otherwise, this princess consort doesn't remember owing you anything. Han Yunqing snorted coldly. You still dare to talk back? The black-dressed woman said as she walked over and suddenly raised her hand to slap her fiercely. Who knew that Han Yunqing raised her hand to block and the poison needle hidden in her hand stabbed into the black-dressed woman's palm. Ah! The black-dressed woman screamed and kicked over, "You slut! If you know what's good for you, then let me go. Otherwise, I guarantee that you will die from the poison within an hour." Han Yunqing said coldly. Even if she had fallen into their hands, she wasn't someone who could be bullied. The black-dressed woman looked at her palm and said disapprovingly, "Just a small poison and you dare to take it out to disgrace yourself." Who knew that Han Yunqing was even more disapproving as she laughed sarcastically, "Just a mere poison, man, what's there to be arrogant about?" When these words came out, the black-dressed woman and green-dressed woman were shocked. Han Yunqing actually knew about Poison Man. There were many poisons in the world, and she did not recognize all of them. Her foot was suspended in midair. She did not know whether to step down or not. The black-robed female assassin regretted it. Why was she so careless and so easily poisoned? She was the one who had kidnapped her, but she was poisoned by the hostage. If his lord knew about this, wouldn't his lord dislike her even more? At this moment, the green-robed female assassin came forward and kicked away the black-robed female assassin's foot, giving her a way out. Compared to the black-robed female assassin, the green-robed female assassin was much calmer. She pulled the black-robed female assassin's hand and checked it carefully without batting an eyelid. As Han Yunqing looked, she rubbed her shoulder and crawled up. She had used such a good opportunity earlier, so of course she had really poisoned her. Moreover, it was an extremely rare poison. If one was not an expert among experts, they should not be able to detect it. If the green-robed female assassin was unable to detect it, then she would have a bargaining chip to negotiate with these two women. Unexpectedly, after a short while, the green-robed female assassin looked over and said indifferently, "Han Yunqing, this is a highly toxic poison created by mixing the Black Widow and the seven-step snake. It's called Black 7. Han Yunqing's eyes darkened. She was shocked. This green-robed female assassin's poison skills were better than she had imagined. Could it be that the 10,000 snake poison tea was created by her? Was she related to Han Ruoxue and Third Madam Li? Was she a subordinate, or was she, if, a terrifying thought flashed through Han Yunqing's mind, and she could not help but shiver. I didn't see wrong, right? People who have been poisoned by this poison will not show any signs of being poisoned. Only after death will traces of the poison appear, the green-robed female assassin said. Only then did Han Yunqing regain her senses. Although she was unwilling to admit it, she still gracefully gave her a thumbs up. Amazing! Han Yunqing and the green-robed female assassin were very calm, but the black-robed female assassin was not. She suddenly broke free from the green-robed female assassin's hand and stretched out her hand towards Han Yunqing. She angrily said, "Give me the antidote." Although she did not know Black 7, she had heard that this poison was very special. The antidote had to be extracted from the poison itself. Therefore, there was only one set of antidote for each set of Black 7. Usually, the antidote and the poison were carried together. In other words, other than the poison master who knew how to refine Black 7, no one else had the antidote. Han Yunqing had a harmless expression as she smiled and said, "I can give you the antidote. However, please send me back the same way you brought me here. 1 hour should be enough, right? Don't even think about it. Even if I die, I will drag you down with me." The black-robed female assassin's gaze turned vicious. The feeling of being threatened by a hostage was extremely unpleasant. But Han Yunqing insisted on angering her as she chuckled and said, "If you want to die, I won't stop you. Your master ordered you to kidnap me, so she must have a request. Why would she let me die?" She knew that there was someone above these two people, and the most terrifying poison master, a poison master who knew how to raise poison. "You!" The black-robed female assassin was extremely irritable as she raised her hand to slap her again. However, this time, the green-robed female assassin immediately pulled her hand. "Enough, you go back and report. Master will definitely have the antidote for Black 7. she said unhappily. I won't. If she doesn't take out the antidote today, I will definitely not let her off. The black-robed female assassin roared angrily as she fiercely shook off the green-robed female assassin's hand. Master ordered them to kidnap Han Yunqing firstly because Han Yunqing was investigating the poisoning of Mu Qinggu. Secondly, it was because Master had taken a fancy to Han Yunqing's poison skills and wanted to take Han Yunqing under his wing for his own use. Her poison skills hadn't made any progress over the past few years, causing the gap between her and Qingyi's skills to grow wider and wider. The Master already disliked her very much. Once Han Yunqing submitted to the Master, it was very possible that she'd gradually replace her position. Once the Master didn't need her anymore, she'd be used for experiments. After all, the Master had been trying to raise poison corpses all these years. Now that she went back empty-handed to ask Master for the antidote for Black 7, it would only make Master even more disappointed and was no different from digging her own grave. No, she would definitely not allow this to happen. Hey Sha, the entire mountain outside has been surrounded. Now is not the time for you to mess around. Qingyi reminded in a deep voice, extremely dissatisfied. I don't care. I want the antidote. As He Sha spoke, she actually pulled out her long sword without warning. Han Yunqing did not expect this and was so shocked that she hurriedly retreated. She did not expect that He Sha actually dared to make a move. According to her understanding, the group of spies in Northern Li country was tightly organized and disciplined. It was unlikely that they would go against the orders of their superiors. Why did this woman in black hate her so much? Qingyi immediately pulled out her sword and chased after her. Clang! Her sword hit He Sha's blade, but He Sha casually swung it away like it was easy. Qingyi chased after her again, but who knew that He Sha's sword tip was deflected and actually hit Qingyi's long sword. Qingyi's poison skills were higher than He Sha's, but her martial arts were far inferior to her. He Sha arrived in front of Han Yunqing in 2 or 3 steps. The tip of her sword was against her neck and she roared, "Antidote!" Han Yunqing did not want to give it to her. This was her only chance, her only bargaining chip. God knows why these 2 people kidnapped her. Are you giving it to me or not? He Sha said sternly. She increased her strength and the tip of her sword really pierced into Han Yunqing's flesh. So painful. Han Yunqing had always been amenable to coaxing but not coercion. She was still hesitating at first, but now she frowned and also refused. She said coldly, "No." He Sha's eyes narrowed into a straight line, exuding a dangerous aura. Because she held her sword too tightly, her whole long sword was trembling. Han Yunqing also narrowed her eyes and stared at her coldly. The two confronted each other, and the atmosphere was tense. He Sha, think carefully. Do you want to go back and lower your head to His Highness, or die here? You only have half an hour. Qingyi reminded her sternly. Even someone as calm as her was agitated. He Sha's hand slightly stiffened and seemed to be wavering. But who knew that at this moment, Han Yunqing suddenly moved forward and let the tip of the sword pierce deeper. Blood gushed out all of a sudden. He Sha, who was still hesitating, immediately withdrew her long sword. She was so scared that she broke out in a cold sweat. She shouted angrily, "Han Yunqi, you lunatic! If you have the guts, kill me. If you don't, then get lost." Han Yunqing said coldly. You. He Sha was speechless. She admitted that she had lost in the end. His Highness had not even subdued Han Yunqing, and she had lost first. Han Yunqing, you win. Sheathing her long sword, He Sha's face was full of unwillingness. She turned and left angrily, disappearing into the cave in an instant. Han Yunqing took out a gauze and covered her neck. Although she fought for a breath, it was a pity that she had no bargaining chip. She never thought that their Highness would be nearby. She could see their Highness in less than half an hour. With He Sha's speed, Half an hour was not too far. Since he was nearby, why didn't he come to meet her? Why did he kidnap her? And how far was this place from Heavenly Fragrance Tea House? Long Fei Yi should know that she was kidnapped, right? Would he come to save her? Or, alright, she herself knew that this was a great opportunity for Long Fei Yi to get rid of his betrothed Qin Wangfei. Seeing Han Yunqing calmly treat her own wound, Qing Yi's eyes flashed with admiration. No wonder Master would risk everything to kidnap this Qin Wangfei. Compared to He Sha, this girl was much more outstanding. Han Yunqing unhurriedly treated her wound, then looked towards Qing Yi. Coldly, she asked, "Speak. Why did you invite me here?" Qing Yi couldn't help but smile at her words. Han Yunqing, who did you learn your poison skills from? If you want to discuss this with me, why don't we return to the Heavenly Fragrance Tea House? We can slowly chat, Han Yunqing replied mildly. You're very smart. Qing Yi wasn't mocking her, but affirming her. You were the one who used the 10,000 snake poison. Han Yunqing seized the chance to ask. Qing Yi didn't answer, but walked towards the entrance of the cave. Han Yunqing immediately followed and asked, how many more people do you have lying in ambush in Tianing? But Qing Yi's mouth was very tight and she still didn't answer. Han Yunqing was about to ask when two black-robed, masked assassins walked in from outside the cave and blocked Han Yunqing's path. You're waiting for someone to come. For your master? Han Yunqing asked again. Unexpectedly, Qing Yi didn't answer, but ordered, tie her up and throw her in the innermost part of the cave. Compared to this green-robed female assassin, Han Yunqing wanted He Sha to stay. This woman was simply airtight. She couldn't get anything out of her, nor could she find a chance to escape. Very quickly, she was tied up and thrown into the innermost part of the cave. What was Qing Yi waiting for? Chapter 115. The sky outside gradually darkened and Han Yunqing curled up in a corner. For the entire afternoon, Qing Yi didn't even look at her once, let alone speak to her. This made Han Yunqing even more certain that Qing Yi was waiting. Perhaps waiting for something to happen, or perhaps waiting for someone to come. Han Yunqing didn't know how long she had been unconscious for and could only tell if it was day or night from the sky outside the cave. On the day she and Mu Qingguo went to Heavenly Fragrance Tea Shop, there were still 12 days before the agreed time of the bet. If she had been unconscious for 2 to 3 days, including today, wouldn't it be 3 to 4 days? Then the remaining time was only 7 to 8 days. 7 to 8 days wasn't long, but it wasn't short either. As for the 10,000 snake poison case, currently she had only confirmed the suspect and hadn't obtained any substantial evidence. She didn't know if Long Fei Yi had found anything from the Han family's third household. If her direction was wrong, if she still hadn't found the culprit by the agreed time, then wouldn't she really lose to Mu Luyue? If she lost, she would have to strip and walk through the streets. Thinking of this, Han Yunqing was depressed. Losing was one thing, but to have all her hard work go to waste was even more depressing. The more she thought, the tighter her brows knitted. But, after a while, it suddenly loosened and she pouted and exhaled a mouthful of turbid air with a helpless expression. Alright, she wasn't even sure if she could go back, yet she was still thinking about the bet. Thinking of this, she drooped her head and sighed in her heart. If only she knew martial arts, that would be great. At least she would have a chance of survival and wouldn't be so passive every time. Han Yunqing didn't know how rich the changes in her expression were when she was thinking about these things. However, the person hiding in the stone wall at the side was watching with great interest. Hey! Hey, Poison Lass! Poison Lass, Han Yunqing was immersed in her own thoughts when she suddenly heard a voice. She immediately focused her attention and listened seriously. She realized that there seemed to be someone talking to her. This way. To the right, hee. To the right. Suddenly, the voice became much louder and Han Yunqing immediately looked to the right. Other than a stone wall, she didn't see anything else. Silly girl. The voice was filled with a playful laughter, and it seemed to have come from the stone wall. Strange. Han Yunqing's line of sight searched the stone wall. Very quickly, she saw a small hole in the stone wall. In the small hole, there was a pair of long and flirtatious eyes staring at her. Han Yunqing was so shocked that she almost screamed. Luckily, she held it in. That pair of eyes blinked a few times, revealing a playful smile as it expressed its goodwill to her. Is it someone you know? Han Yunqing remembered that among the people she knew, no one had such flirtatious and beautiful peach blossom eyes. Although the hole was very small and there was no way to see the eyes clearly, Han Yunqing was still very sure. Who was it? She calmed herself down and looked warily at the entrance of the cave. The black-clothed masked assassin in the cave had already left. Qing Yi was sitting alone at the entrance of the cave with her back facing her. She was a little far away, so she didn't notice the commotion here. Don't worry, she can't hear us. The man said in a low voice. Even his voice was filled with laughter, and he seemed to be in a good mood. Han Yunqing turned around and looked at that pair of eyes warily. She asked in a low voice, I don't know you, right? It's fine as long as I know you. The man smiled. Then who are you? Han Yunqing asked while thinking that there must be a cave behind this stone wall. That person should be next door. The person who came to save you. The man said and seemed to take a step back. Han Yunqing vaguely caught a glimpse of his nose. It was especially tall and beautiful. Long and narrow peach blossom eyes, a high nose bridge, and if he had sexy thin lips, wouldn't he be a handsome man? Of course, Han Yunqing wasn't in the mood to think about these at this moment. She was very sure that she had never seen this guy before. Brother, it's not very appropriate to keep me in suspense at this time. She said mildly and shifted her position to face the wall. It's pretty good. I don't plan to save you now. Since I have nothing to do, let's have a chat. The man's smile was especially charming. He was lazy and leisurely, not at all like he was in deep danger. He was obviously flirting with her. Han Yunqing couldn't help but roll her eyes. She simply turned her head away and ignored him. She thought that this guy was probably just passing by to buy soy sauce, right? Unexpectedly, Han Yunqing waited for a long time, but the man didn't continue to speak. She hurriedly turned her head and saw that the small cave was empty. There was nothing there. It can't be. Was he really just here to buy soy sauce? Hey! Hey, are you still there? Han Yunqing hurriedly asked. It wasn't easy for someone to come. No matter what, it was a chance to escape. Hey! Are you still there? Helpless, Han Yunqing asked a few times, but there was no response from the other side. Han Yunqing panicked. She glanced at the cave entrance. Seeing that Qing Yi didn't move, she carefully shifted her position to the side of the stone wall. Through the small cave, she could faintly see that there really was a cave next door. However, there wasn't a single person in sight. Are you there? If you're there, just squeak. Han Yunqing felt a little helpless. However, just as she finished speaking, a squeak suddenly came from the other side. Han Yunqing was stunned. Then, she was overjoyed. Hey, you're still there. My name isn't Hey. My name is Gu. His voice was very low, so Han Yunqing couldn't hear him clearly. Hey, what did you say? My name isn't Hey. My name is Gu. That person repeated himself again, as if he was deliberately lowering his voice. This time, Han Yunqing heard him. She was shocked. What? Gucci Sha. She heard a light chuckle from the other side. She wasn't sure if that person heard Han Yunqing's words. He repeated himself again, but his voice was much clearer. My name isn't Hey. My name is Gu. This time, Han Yunqing finally heard him clearly. Gu. These 3 words sounded very similar to Gu Qi Sha. No wonder she heard wrongly. However, Gu was just a name and not his real name. In any case, she hadn't heard of it before and didn't know who it was. After confirming that the person was there, Han Yunqing shifted her position with difficulty. Her back was facing the wall so that she looked a little more normal. Not long after she sat down, Qing Yi turned around to look at her. Han Yunqing didn't move. She didn't avoid her gaze and looked back at her from afar. Qing Yi looked at her for a moment but didn't say anything. Then, she turned her head back. Han Yunqing secretly sighed. She didn't dare to speak immediately. After waiting for a while and seeing that Qing Yi didn't turn around, she said in a low voice, "Hey, why did you save me? My name isn't Hey. If you don't mind, you can call me Shao Qi." A teasing laughter sounded, causing Han Yunqing to feel a chill. A grown man called Shao Qi. She thought that the guy next door must be a show-off. Next door, Gu was sitting with his back against the wall just like Han Yunqing. However, he wasn't sitting upright like Han Yunqing. Instead, he was languid and relaxed. He was like a cat basking in the sun in winter, languid to the bone. He wore a fiery red robe with wide sleeves that covered the floor luxuriously. His hand casually rested on one of his legs. His 5 fingers were slender and fair. His skin was paler than a normal person's and looked so delicate that it could be broken by the slightest breeze. He smiled lightly, his breath like orchids. His face was so beautiful that it made the world lose its light. Those eyes were so seductive that it could make one's soul melt. "Why did you save me?" Next door, Han Yunqing asked again. "Because I like you." Gu answered so naturally, as if he was joking. Han Yunqing seemed to have gotten used to his teasing. She pretended not to hear him and asked again patiently, "Then when do you plan to save me?" "In a few days," Gu said again. She didn't know if he was being perfunctory or if he had really calculated the time. Han Yunqing wasn't willing to give up and continued to ask, "Then how many days later?" However, this time, Gu didn't answer. Instead, he asked, "Does your neck still hurt?" "Then how many days later?" Han Yunqing continued. "Poison girl, where did you learn your poison skills from? How are you so good? Is your master still around?" Gu continued to ask. "Then how many days later?" Han Yunqing repeated stubbornly. "I remember that you weren't that good in the past, right?" Gu asked again. Rather than a question, it was better to say that he was talking to himself. He raised his head, his brows slightly furrowed. He didn't move at all, like a painting of a beauty in deep thought. Next door, Han Yunqing looked up at the sky. She had already given up. Who was this mysterious guy? Why did he appear here? Did he chase after them or did he meet them by chance? He knew her. There should be many people who knew her. How could she guess? The man next door had an unknown background, and the woman at the cave entrance had an unknown motive. Han Yunqing let out a long sigh. She could only wait. It was already late at night. Cries of anguish could be heard from the Celestial Fragrance Tea Shop's prison. Long Fei Ye's interrogation had continued from noon until now. He was still using the terrifying rat torture. Not only did he kill one as a warning to others, but he was also torturing them one by one. In the dim prison cell, a huge rat cage was placed in the middle. Everyone was standing, except for Long Fei Yi, who was sitting alone. Guard Shengguan was in charge of the interrogation, while Mu Qinggu was in charge of the punishment. From the start, Long Fei hadn't said a word, but the cold aura emanating from his body grew more and more terrifying. Leaving aside the people being interrogated, even the people waiting around them felt their hairs stand on end at the sight of that fiendish god in the shadows. Their hearts trembled in fear. Ah! The person who was being tortured let out a miserable cry, which resounded through the entire prison cell. His heart was facing the opening of the rat cage, and the big black rat was digging out his heart. Ah! Spare me. I don't know anything. Ah! I really... Suddenly, the miserable cry stopped abruptly. Then, the person fell backward, and a big hole was bitten in his heart. A big black rat buried its head in it, leaving only half of its body outside. Another person was interrogated to death. Guard Shengguan's interrogation was very slow and detailed. Although it had been going on since noon, he actually didn't interrogate many people. Very quickly, many people around couldn't help but vomit, and some even fainted directly. However, fainting from fear was useless. Very soon, they would be woken up and queued up for this cruel interrogation. There were only about 20 people left. Long Fei Yi was determined to get a result from the interrogation. He killed decisively, and was cold and ruthless. From the beginning to the end, he didn't even frown. The room was silent, and only the faint sound of teeth chattering could be heard from the people waiting to be interrogated. God knows how scared they were. Long Fei Yi was expressionless. He elegantly waved his hand, indicating for Guard Shengguan to interrogate the next person. Seeing this, a young guard who was queuing at the front of the queue immediately knelt down and prostrated himself on the ground, crying out loud, "I don't know anything. I really don't know. Guard Shengguan, I'm getting married at the end of the month, please let me go. I'm begging you." Guard Shengguan hesitated. If this interrogation continued, more innocent people would die. He looked at His Highness Duke of Qin, but His Highness Duke of Qin didn't react at all. Left with no choice, Guard Shengguan could only forcefully drag him over. Unexpectedly, at this moment, someone suddenly rushed out from the back of the crowd and shouted, "Enough, stop the interrogation, I confess. I confess." Chapter 116. Finally, someone couldn't help but stand up. If Long Fei Yi was certain that there was a traitor among them, then there had to be. Only then did his cold and calm eyes slowly move towards the person who rushed out. He saw that it was a middle-aged man, and based on his attire, he didn't look like an ordinary guard. "Hui Yang, so it's you." Guard Shengguan was astonished. This fellow was the head of the South Mountain Guards and a candidate for the next leader position. He'd personally promoted him to be a capable subordinate, so how could he be a spy? Hui Yang looked at Guard Shengguan and lowered his head in remorse. Mu Qinggu immediately stepped forward to hold him down. "How did you ambush them? Where are they?" Long Fei Yi asked coldly, finally interrogating them personally. "Those people have been lying in ambush in the South Mountain for a long time. They didn't come for esteemed Wang Fei, since Hui Yang had stood up, it meant that he was prepared to die. There was nothing to fear, but Long Fei Ye's icy eyes made him timid. He paused before continuing. They came here specifically to wait for His Majesty. I don't know why, but as soon as they heard esteemed Wang Fei was coming up the mountain, they made a move against her." Guard Shengguan suddenly grew angry. "All right, Hui Yang, how long have you been lying in ambush? How did you lure them in?" Over the past few years, Emperor Tianhui would personally go to the fragrant tea plantation to pick tea leaves. He'd hide his identity and visit incognito, but Guard Shengguan had always received him personally. Thus, Guard Shengguan had been strengthening the South Mountain's defenses. "It's been more than half a year. They've been lying in ambush nearby, so they'll be here soon," Hui Yang answered truthfully. He didn't even have the face to look at Guard Shengguan as he fell to his knees. "Guard Shengguan, I've failed to live up to your expectations. I was forced to do this. They kidnapped my old mother, so I had no choice." Hearing this, Guard Shengguan lost his temper and kicked him viciously. "Only you have an old mother. So many brothers died today. Who doesn't have a mother? You son of a bitch." Hui Yang was a squad leader. With him as a spy, it'd be much easier for the assassins to avoid the guards and enter the South Mountain. Moreover, Hui Yang would be the first to know who was going up the mountain to pick tea. People from northernly country. Long Fei Yi narrowed his eyes dangerously. He did not expect that those spies would even list the emperor as a target for assassination. Wasn't northernly going overboard this time? I don't know who those people are. The one I met was a woman. She was in the cave on the easternmost cliff of Nanshan Hill. Those assassins usually hide there. With their speed, it would only take them 2 cups of tea's time to get here. Hui Yang answered truthfully. At first, he was hoping for a fluke, but when he saw the rat torture, he was scared. However, when he saw his brothers die one by one, he couldn't hold it in anymore. Upon hearing this, Long Fei Yi stood up and asked coldly, "She's been kidnapped there too?" Hui Yang was so scared that he trembled and stammered, this servant doesn't know. If they can't go down the mountain, they can only hide there." Without another word, Long Fei Yi turned and left. Mu Qinggu also hurriedly chased after him. Guard Shengguan looked at Hui Yang, so angry that he couldn't speak. After a while, he said coldly, "Men, lock him up." As he spoke, he also hurriedly chased after him. When he reached the door, he didn't forget to say, "Continue to look for the owner, continue to look for her." He prayed that esteemed Wang Fei must be in the cave. Otherwise, Heavenly Fragrance Tea House would be doomed with such a spy. At this time, the sky outside was already slightly bright and the cold wind was bone-chilling. Only the heavens knew how fast Long Fei Yi was. Even Mu Qinggu could not catch up, let alone guard Shengguan. Saving people was a matter of minutes. If His Highness Duke of Qin was faster, esteemed Wang Fei would suffer less. However, when they reached the easternmost cliff of Nanshan Hill, they saw His Highness Duke of Qin standing at the edge of the cliff. He did not go down. Was His Highness Duke of Qin waiting for them? That was what Mu Qinggu thought, but he quickly rejected the idea. It was very likely that his and guard Shengguan's martial arts combined could not compare to His Highness Duke of Qin. His Highness Duke of Qin had never needed help. As soon as guard Shengguan arrived, he immediately reported, "Your Highness, this is the easternmost cliff." "What's down there?" Long Fei Yi asked. This place was already 2 mountains away from Heavenly Fragrance Tea House. Guard Shengguan rarely came here, so he was not familiar with the surrounding environment. He looked down and saw that the bottom of the cliff was covered in fog. Visibility was very low, and the fog seemed to be a little dark due to the lack of light. "The morning fog hasn't dissipated yet, right?" Guard Shengguan said, then muttered to himself, "But this fog seems to be black." Mu Qinggu also looked down, but he insisted, "This is miasma." If Long Fei Yi had not experienced the poisonous mosquito swarm, perhaps he would also think that this was miasma. However, after that experience, Long Fei Yi was very sure that the black mass in the abyss was the poisonous mosquito swarm, and the scale was even larger than the previous one. However, he could not be sure if these poisonous mosquito swarm were being controlled by someone to guard this place, or if they had gathered together due to time and climate changes. "Who came here before?" Long Fei Yi asked. Mu Qinggu and guard Shengguan were both confused, but they did not dare to ask. Guard Shengguan hurriedly replied, "Hui Yang knows this place, so he should have been here before." "Bring him here." Long Fei Yi said coldly. His icy voice hid his anger, and only the heavens knew when it would explode. After guard Shengguan left, Mu Qinggu asked in a low voice, "Your Highness, could it be that it's not miasma? Poisonous mosquito swarm?" Long Fei Ye's gaze fell on the black fog in the abyss, and his brows were slightly solemn. Faced with the poisonous mosquito swarm, all the poison masters under his command were helpless, and only Han Yunqing could do something about it. Unfortunately, the person he wanted to save now was her. This damned woman, why did she go up the mountain to pick tea for no reason? Poisonous mosquito swarm, this. Mu Qingwu was shocked. Unexpectedly, just as they were talking, the black fog in the abyss suddenly began to float up, and as it floated up, it continued to spread in all directions. Was someone controlling the poisonous mosquito swarm? Was the person hiding in the abyss trying to escape? Long Fei Ye's gaze suddenly turned cold, and he was ready to fight. However, the situation quickly exceeded his imagination. The venomous mosquito swarm spread out faster and faster. Soon, they filled up the entire abyss. Moreover, they continued to spread out in all directions, spreading to the few forests in the surroundings. Long Fei Yi and Mu Qingwu could only retreat again and again, climbing to a high place to look down. As the sky became brighter and the light became stronger, they could also see more clearly. Looking down from above, they saw that the poisonous mosquito swarm was like a huge sea of dark clouds, surging and billowing, gradually enveloping the surrounding forests. Guard Shengguan rushed over with Huiyang in tow, and when the two saw this scene, they were both shocked and dumbfounded. Huiyang's face was pale, and he immediately shouted, "Go! Masters, hurry up and leave. This is the outbreak of the poisonous miasma, it will erupt once every 10 years, I saw it when I was young. All the surrounding mountains will be enveloped, hurry up and run. Once you come into contact with this thing, you will be poisoned to death." Originally there. Long Fei Yao was very surprised, and immediately asked, "How many mountains will it endanger? How long will it last?" Huiyang gestured, "The surrounding area is all in danger, and soon the entire mountain will be covered in poisonous miasma. It will only disperse at noon tomorrow at the earliest." As soon as he said this, Long Fei Yi immediately understood. This large-scale poisonous mosquito swarm was not controlled by humans, but it could still be used by others. The people who kidnapped Han Yunqing were all people who knew how to use poison, so naturally they were not afraid of the poisonous mosquito swarm. Now all the mountain passes would be sealed, and there were 3 groups of people searching the mountain. The assassins did not dare to show themselves because they were afraid, and did not dare to blackmail him with conditions. Without a doubt, they wanted to escape unscathed, and then come back to negotiate with him. And this outbreak of poisonous mosquito swarm was the best opportunity for them to escape in the chaos. This matter was troublesome. Long Fei Yi looked at the black mosquito swarm that was growing larger and larger, his handsome brows tightly knitted together. Poison attacks were his only weakness. Huiyang stood to the side and watched the poisonous miasma continue to spread. He was terrified, and wanted to speak several times, but did not dare. Finally, Mu Qingwu and Guard Shengguan could not hold it in anymore. "Your Highness, let's retreat," Mu Qingwu said seriously. Guard Shengguan then dared to take the opportunity to speak, "Your Highness, if we don't retreat now, it will be too late. They kidnapped the Princess Consort, so they must have a request. This matter should be discussed at length." Long Fei Ye's fists in his sleeves were tightly clenched. He was so close to being poisoned again. All his failures were because of poison. Very good. He would retreat. He would wait and see how far these spies could escape. "Retreat," Long Fei Yi said coldly, and turned to leave. Mu Qingwu and the others did not dare to stay any longer, and hurriedly followed. At this time, the poisonous mosquito swarm had already covered the mountains and plains. Han Yunqing was dragged to the entrance of the cave by Qing Yi. Seeing the densely packed mosquito swarm in front of her, she could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. There were so many of them, it was too scary. You. Impossible, you can't control them." Han Yunqing shook her head. Such a large poisonous mosquito swarm could not be controlled by humans. Even if the climate and terrain were used, it would not be possible. Qing Yi smiled coldly, "Yes, the person who can control the poisonous mosquito swarm is already dead." Han Yunqing was shocked when she heard this. Last time, she was the one who helped Long Fei Yi kill the female spy. Qing Yi obviously did not know about this. Han Yunqing was not stupid enough to take the initiative to say it. She finally understood what Qing Yi was waiting for. This is natural. You are waiting for this opportunity. You want to take advantage of the chaos to escape. Qing Yi looked over. Suddenly, she grabbed Han Yunqing's chin and stuffed a pill into her mouth. Han Yunqing did not expect this and swallowed it immediately. Don't worry, it will protect your life. Qing Yi snorted. Han Yunqing knew another piece of information. This woman knew the antidote for the poisonous mosquito swarm, which meant that she knew how to raise poisonous mosquitoes. Last time, the female spy who controlled the poisonous mosquitoes was called Sister One. Long Fei Yi forced out information from the captives that this Sister One was the leader of all the female spies. This meant that Qing Yi was Sister Wen's direct superior. In other words, the person in charge of all the spies in northern Li country was Qing Yi. The poison that Mu Qinggu planted must have been concocted by you? Han Yunqing said coldly. She was very sure. She had fought with Sister Wen before. Sister Wen could not possibly concoct the 10,000 snake poison. However, Qing Yi had this ability. Han Yunqing, being too smart is not a good thing for a woman. Qing Yi reminded coldly. Han Yunqing did not reply, but her eyes flashed. She thought, she could not find the person who directly poisoned Mu Qinggu. However, if she found the person who concocted the poison, it could be considered as finding the murderer, right? Qing Yi. This princess has taken a liking to you. At this time, a man in black flew out from the poisonous mosquito swarm and reported respectfully, Sister Qing, the northwest direction. We can go now. Qing Yi nodded. She grabbed Han Yunqing and flew down. At the moment of falling, Han Yunqing saw a flash of red at the entrance of the cave. That guy Gu, wasn't he afraid of poison? Chapter 117. Han Yunqing caught a glimpse of a red figure, then she couldn't see the person anymore. At the same time, Qing Yi grabbed her and flew towards the northern mountain range. There were poisonous mosquitoes all over the mountain, it could even be said that the air was filled with poisonous mosquitoes. At this time, even if the people searching the mountain had the courage to continue, they would be poisoned to death very quickly. This group of assassins basically didn't stop them and their journey was smooth, but their speed was slightly slower. Han Yunqing also didn't struggle. She was entangled with one thing. Who exactly was that fellow Gu? Wasn't he afraid of the poisonous mosquitoes? Could it be that he had the antidote? If he had the antidote, he would have already guessed that there were poisonous mosquitoes here. Because the antidote for the poisonous mosquitoes wasn't that easy to find. Thinking of this, Han Yunqing couldn't help but look around. Unfortunately, there was a dense mass of black everywhere. Even the trees couldn't be seen clearly, not to mention the hidden people. Was that guy following them around? Earlier in the cave, there was such a good opportunity but he didn't make a move. Once the assassins escaped from this mountain, it would be even harder to save people. Gu, was he really here to save her? With a stomach full of doubts, Han Yunqing didn't dare to pin her hopes on a stranger. She had to save herself. Where exactly are you bringing me to? She questioned loudly. Qing Yi glanced over and didn't say a word. You should at least tell me. Are you bringing me to see your lord? Han Yunqing probed again. Unfortunately, this Qing Yi was very calm and had a completely different temperament from that He Sha. It was harder than ascending to the heavens to get any clues from her mouth. Not saying it right. If you don't say it, you'll regret it. Han Yunqing thought hatefully. Seeing that everything around her was getting darker and darker, she simply closed her eyes. In just a moment, a colorless and odorless medicinal powder appeared in her palm. Although her hands were tied and unable to move, but her detoxification system was connected to her brain. Her soul, or rather consciousness, could completely override the detoxification system. With just a thought, she opened the detoxification system and the medicinal powder that she wanted appeared in her hands. Of course, taking this kind of small powder didn't require much mental strength. If he took a larger medicine or a medicine that was stored in the detoxification system, he would have to spend more energy. He couldn't get it just by thinking about it. If Tsing Yi knew that she was the one who had helped Long Fei Yi kill Sister Wen who could control poisonous mosquitoes, perhaps Tsing Yi would be more prepared. Unfortunately, she didn't know anything. Compared to He Sha, she did not look down on Han Yunqing. However, she still underestimated her. Han Yunqing could disperse and kill the poisonous mosquitoes, so she also had a way to attract them. The powder in her hand was called mosquito coil. This mosquito-repellent incense was not the mosquito-repellent incense used in modern times. It was a mosquito-repellent incense used to attract poisonous mosquitoes. As long as she released it, the poisonous mosquitoes would definitely be attracted. Holding the powder tightly, Han Yunqing slowly opened her eyes. A trace of craftiness flashed across her clear and bright eyes. She carefully released the powder between her fingers and let it flow out a little. Very quickly, the poisonous mosquitoes surrounded them. Luckily, Tsing Yi's speed was fast. Otherwise, Han Yunqing's hand would definitely be bitten full of holes. During the flight, Han Yunqing tried hard to look behind her from the corner of her eyes. She saw a group of poisonous mosquitoes gathering behind her. It was so densely packed that it was scary. If someone with trypophobia saw this scene, they would immediately go crazy. Han Yunqing immediately kept the medicinal powder back into the detoxification system. Luckily, otherwise, if she attracted the poisonous mosquitoes, she would also go crazy. Tsing Yi was seriously avoiding the branches and shuttling through the forest. She didn't notice the abnormality behind her. Very quickly, they were far away from the group of poisonous mosquitoes. Han Yunqing secretly sighed and her lips curled into a bright smile. After giving it a try, the effect of this medicinal powder was pretty good. Attracting the poisonous mosquitoes was also particular about the timing and method. At this moment, the entire mountain was filled with poisonous mosquitoes. If she released the powder, not only would it attract trouble, it would also arouse Tsing Yi's vigilance. She was waiting for the best opportunity. A group of black-clothed masked assassins were leading the way. Tsing Yi pulled Han Yunqing and followed behind. Although they had the antidote, but as the sky became darker and darker, they had no choice but to slow down as they walked in the poisonous mosquitoes. Time passed by slowly and the sky was about to turn dark. At this moment, the people who were searching the mountain had all retreated. All the mountain passes' defenses had also been removed. This meant that Long Fei Yi had given up. However, he still stood on the highest peak of this mountain range, overlooking the mountains. Looking down from such a high place, he could only see a layer of faint black fog pervading the mountains. As the sky darkened, it became more and more unclear. "Your Highness, the poisonous mosquitoes have already spread out from all the mountain passes. In some places, they've spread for several li." Guard Shengguan hurried over to report. He had originally wanted to expand the encirclement, hoping that perhaps he could still encircle the assassins. However, now that the poisonous miasma had spread to the foot of the mountain, this method of encirclement was no longer feasible. This seemed to be within Long Fei Ye's expectations. He didn't say anything. His deep eyes were like the sea, hiding the shadows of the mountains within. No one could tell what he was thinking. Seeing that His Highness Duke of Qin didn't reply, Guard Shengguan resentfully glanced at Mu Qinggu. Mu Qinggu frowned and tried to persuade, "Your Highness, the poisonous miasma won't disperse until tomorrow afternoon. Let's go back first." He thought that when His Highness said to retreat, it meant to give up on the pursuit and wait for the assassins to come and demand a ransom. He didn't expect that when His Highness said to retreat, it was only for his brothers to retreat. Based on the current situation, His Highness had no intention of giving up. But even if they didn't give up, would they still be able to find the culprit? After all, This area was surrounded by barren mountains with plenty of ferocious beasts and poisonous insects. Swamps were everywhere as well. Emperor Tianhui had once considered the safety of Tianning's capital city and sent troops to explore this area. Unfortunately, he'd always retreated in the face of difficulties and could only station troops to guard the outskirts. Once the culprit escaped into the depths of the mountains, it'd be impossible to find him again. "All of you can withdraw," Long Feiyi finally spoke up, his voice even colder than the winds at the peak of the mountain. Even Mu Qinggu didn't dare open his mouth to speak due to the faint coldness that kept him at arm's length. He shot a look at guard Shengguan before the two of them left resentfully. After nightfall, the mountains were even more dangerous. Moreover, they couldn't see anything from here. What was the point of waiting here? What's wrong with His Highness? Guard Shengguan didn't understand. Victory and defeat were common occurrences in war. The assassins had only kidnapped the culprit without discussing any terms. It was still unknown who would win in the end. With His Highness Duke of Qin's personality, he shouldn't be reacting like this, right? Moreover, the culprit wasn't anyone important. Wasn't it just Qin Wangfei? A woman who wasn't even welcomed into the gates by His Highness Duke of Qin himself. Maybe he's worried about esteemed Wangfei. Alright, Mu Qinggu couldn't believe his own words. Guard Shengguan's eyes widened at his words, his expression incredulous. He'd only seen His Highness Duke of Qin so angry because of the assassin's arrogance, not because he was worried about esteemed Wangfei. "Young general, this..." Guard Shengguan was about to speak when Mu Qinggu waved a hand to stop the topic. Actually, he wasn't sure either. That night, neither Guard Shengguan nor Mu Qinggu dared to sleep. They waited for His Highness Duke of Qin to return, but he didn't come back even after daybreak. Huiyang hadn't lied. This massive outbreak of mosquitoes had lasted the entire night and showed no signs of dispersing even after daybreak. It looked like they wouldn't disperse until noon. The golden rays of the rising sun shone on Long Feiyi's frosty face. He narrowed his eyes slightly and elegantly raised a hand to block the sunlight. Less than 2 hours later, the sun rose and shone brightly over the entire mountain forest. Overlooking the mountains at this time was a completely different scene compared to yesterday evening. At this time, it was obvious where the mosquito swarms were denser and where they were thinner. Long Feiyi's cold gaze swept over every inch of the mountain forest, as if he was searching for something. Guard Shengguan and Mu Qinggu had arrived a long time ago. They sat off to the side and watched, not daring to disturb him. Finally, when it was close to noon, the sunlight became more and more intense. The dark patches in the mountain forest began to fade and the mosquito swarms began to disperse. Xing Yi and the others had long since abducted Han Yunqing and left the mountains that very night. They headed all the way north and entered an even more desolate mountain wilderness. There were no more mosquitoes around them. At this time, Xing Yi handed Han Yunqing over to the black-clothed masked assassin. She washed her face by a small stream and drank water. Han Yunqing glanced at the sky and a sly smile appeared on her lips. She knew that this natural climate would cause the mosquito swarms to gather. At this time, the mosquitoes would begin to disperse. The time had come. She raised her head and faced the wind. Finding the direction of the wind, she released the medicinal powder that she had been holding tightly in her hand. Very quickly, the powder drifted southward with the wind. It was silent, colorless, and odorless. After washing up, Xing Yi walked over and used a lotus leaf to scoop some water to feed Han Yunqing. Han Yunqing didn't refuse and thanked her. Xing Yi didn't say anything. When she finished drinking, she grabbed her by the arm and prepared to leave. "Can you at least let me drink a few more mouthfuls?" Han Yunqing asked pitifully. "We can't stay here for long." Xing Yi replied coldly. She had been on high alert all this time because her opponent was the terrifying Duke of Qin of Tianning. She naturally didn't dare to lower her guard against a duke that even her master feared. "Just drink a few more mouthfuls of water." It won't take long. If I die of thirst, you guys. Before Han Yunqing could finish speaking, Xing Yi ruthlessly dragged her away without another word. Han Yunqing's little face sank. She wasn't going to give her time, was she? Then she could only play Meng Liao. Xing Yi dragged Han Yunqing along. From time to time, they would borrow strength from rocks and trees to shuttle through the forest at high speed. Han Yunqing's hand kept spilling medicinal powder, which was carried by the wind behind them. Everything was carried out silently. As more and more medicinal powder was blown away into the forest, the poison mosquitoes that were about to disperse sensed the fragrance. At first it was just a few, but soon it grew into a swarm. Gradually, it grew into a large swarm. They gathered together and fought to be the first to snatch the medicinal powder particles in the air. These medicinal powder particles were absolutely attractive to the poison mosquitoes, so much so that it would cause them to fight and kill each other. Long Fei Yi stood high on the peak of a mountain, watching the gradually dispersing shadows and the clear forest. Soon enough, he noticed a new swarm of shadows gathering in the north. Leng Yi's lips curled into a perfect arc. His cold face finally broke into a smile. Very good, Han Yunqing. You really didn't disappoint your lordship. Long Fei Yi didn't say a word. Hands behind his back, he lightly tapped the ground with the tips of his feet and flew off the cliff. His figure was graceful and nimble as he headed towards the black shadows in the north. Your Highness! Mu Qinggu cried out in alarm, springing to his feet. The poison miasma hasn't completely dispersed yet. Guard Shengguan was frightened as well. Chapter 118. Mu Qinggu and Guard Shengguan chased him to the edge of the cliff. Immediately, they saw a dense mass of black shadows in the forest in the north. It was like a black cloud. What was going on? The two of them were as confused as monks. Seeing His Highness Duke of Qin's figure gradually disappear into the distance, the two of them hesitated. Should they chase or not? Unexpectedly, just as they were hesitating, the large oval-shaped black cloud in the north suddenly changed. It gradually elongated into a long strip, and showed signs of spreading towards the north. What was going on? Could it be that this poisonous miasma could change its shape? Even if it changed shape because of the wind, it couldn't change so quickly and so neatly. Moreover, the wind was blowing from the north. Strange. Young General, Is this really poisonous miasma? Guard Shengguan felt that something was wrong no matter how he looked at it. Mu Qinggu stared closely at the black mist, only to see that the black mist was actually moving. From afar, it looked like a black satin under the sunlight, floating towards the north. Moreover, it was moving faster and faster. Even the stupidest person could tell that this was definitely not poisonous miasma. Chase! Mu Qinggu said as he leaped down and chased after it. Guard Shengguan couldn't care less and followed closely behind. At this moment, Long Fei Yi was very close to the strip-shaped mosquito swarm. He landed on a tree nearby and saw clearly that the poisonous mosquitoes seemed to be fighting for something in the air. As they fought to be the first to fly forward. If he chased in this direction, would he be able to catch up to Han Yunqing? Long Fei Yi didn't chase to the front. He followed behind the poisonous mosquito swarm from beginning to end. He knew that as long as he followed the swarm, he wouldn't lose sight of the person. Mosquitoes' sense of smell was much more sensitive than a human's. The poisonous mosquito swarm wasn't fast, so it wasn't difficult to keep up with them. About a mile ahead of the poisonous mosquito swarm, Qing Yi and Han Yunqing were running at full speed. The distance was a little far, and the poisonous mosquito swarm was silent. They did not notice anything strange behind them. First of all, she had to escape with all her might to ensure her safety. Second of all, His Highness had said to bring this woman to their hidden headquarters in Tianing country. As long as she took care of the matter, she could go back. She was also a spy. Her identity was sensitive and she carried a heavy responsibility. If she left for too long, it would arouse suspicion. Qing Yi's speed was unprecedentedly fast. However, not far behind her, a red shadow, like a sharp arrow, scuttled through the grass, following closely behind. After running for an unknown amount of time, the red figure suddenly stopped and hid behind a large tree. Who else could this person be other than Gu? Seeing that Qing Yi and the others had gone far away, he then stood up and raised his head to sniff the air. Then, he stretched out his hand and stopped against the wind for a moment. He put down his hand and sniffed his palm. He was stunned at first, but then he smiled. Poison lass, you're so capable. When those long and narrow eyes smiled, they were as beautiful as they could be. He looked back and licked his lips playfully. Then he turned and immediately chased after them. The poisonous mosquitoes and Qing Yi's group were separated by two large mountains. The mosquitoes chased while fighting for the medicinal powder in the air, so their speed was naturally not very fast. Moreover, Qing Yi's speed was very fast. By the next morning, the poisonous mosquitoes still had not caught up to the source of the medicinal powder, Han Yunqing's hand. There was even a mountain between them. At this time, Mu Qingguo and guard Shengguan had already caught up to Long Fei Yi. Your Highness, what's going on? Mu Qingguo asked seriously. He had a faint guess but didn't dare to confirm it. When Long Fei Yi explained the situation, Mu Qingguo and guard Shengguan were both dumbfounded. That means the assassin is right in front. Your Highness, why aren't we chasing? Guard Shengguan was very excited. This prince is very curious about where they want to take Han Yunqing. Long Fei Yi was very interested and not in a hurry. If he wanted to chase, he would have already saved Han Yunqing by now, right? If he didn't chase, he would be casting a long line to catch a big fish. When he said this, Mu Qingguo and guard Shengguan immediately understood. However, guard Shengguan was very puzzled. If His Highness Duke of Qin was really worried about esteemed Wang Fei, his first reaction would be to save her, right? But now, he was undoubtedly using esteemed Wang Fei as bait to directly attack the thieves' lair. If things went wrong, the bandits might even kill the hostage. Seeing His Highness Duke of Qin's cold and resolute expression, guard Shengguan was very sure that Mu Qingguo had made a mistake yesterday. Sacrificing a single Han Yunqing to uncover a nest of thieves was killing two birds with one stone for His Highness Duke of Qin. It was the best of both worlds. If Han Yunqing sacrificed herself in the line of duty, the Duke of Qin's estate would still have face. Since His Highness Duke of Qin had already said this, Mu Qingguo and guard Shengguan didn't dare to urge him and could only follow closely behind. Xing Yi and the others were in front, Gu was behind, the poisonous mosquito swarm was behind, and Long Fei Yi was at the back. This pursuit was like the mantis stalking the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. Just who would become the oriole in the end? Time flowed by and soon, a few days had passed. As they got closer and closer, the amount of mosquito coil powder in the air also increased and the speed of the poisonous mosquito swarm gradually slowed down. Early this morning, Han Yunqing decisively stopped releasing the mosquito coil powder. Xing Yi hadn't said a word along the way, but Han Yunqing could feel that they were about to reach their destination. She had attracted such a large poisonous mosquito swarm behind them for so many days. Could it be that no one had discovered the abnormality in the mountain forest? Or could it be that after the poisonous mosquito swarm exploded yesterday, the people searching the mountain all retreated and not a single one was left behind? So in the wilderness, no one had discovered the newly gathered poisonous mosquito swarm? Even if Mu Qingguo and guard Shengguan were negligent, Long Fei Yi wouldn't give up so quickly. He should have thought that she had a way to make use of the poisonous mosquito swarm. Even if he didn't think of it, with his personality, he wouldn't retreat at the first obstacle, right? Or, that guy really didn't come. However, even if that guy really didn't come, the large number of poisonous mosquito swarm in the mountain forest had already dispersed. Mu Qinggu and guard Shengguan should have sent people into the mountain to search a long time ago. Looking at the time, how could they have discovered the moving poisonous mosquito swarm by now? Why was it that after so many days, there was no movement behind them at all? Could it be that Mu Qinggu and the others had given up on the pursuit? Qin Wengfei being kidnapped was a big deal. Who could make Mu Qinggu and guard Shengguan give up on the pursuit? Only Long Feiyi. He didn't come himself. He didn't even care about her anymore. Was he using this opportunity to kill her? Thinking of this, Han Yunqing's originally spirited eyes gradually dimmed. She was stunned for a long, long time before the corners of her lips pulled up into a self-mocking smile. Long Feiyi, on what basis did he come? On what basis did he save her? On such a cold day, he could just sit by the stove in the greenhouse and patiently wait for this bunch of robbers to come knocking on his door. Or, he could just let the robbers kill the hostage and not be threatened by the robbers. The Empress Dowager appointed the marriage and the Emperor forced the marriage. If there wasn't a very good reason, he couldn't divorce his wife. Even if she died, the Duke of Qin's manor had to give a reason that could convince everyone. This time, wasn't it the best time? Right at this time, Qing Yi suddenly landed on the ground without any warning. Han Yunqing's foot landed heavily on the ground. Her right foot that hadn't recovered yet was hit like this. The sudden pain in her ankle caused her nerves to tense up. With this pain, Han Yunqing's self-mocking smile turned into a light laugh. That guy had just rubbed her foot a few times. How could she forget her awkward status and treat herself as someone important? What Nan Shan read? What are you laughing at? Qing Yi asked cautiously. Han Yunqing glanced at her. Her smile turned cold and she didn't answer. This woman's smile was filled with determination and a ruthlessness that even men couldn't compare to. It made Qing Yi fearful for no reason. She grabbed Han Yunqing's collar. What are you laughing at? Qing Yi, after being silent for so many days, finally spoke. Han Yunqing looked at her coldly. The smile on her lips deepened, but she didn't speak. Qing Yi was even more anxious. She grabbed her collar and fiercely pushed. Speak, what are you laughing at? Who knew that at this time, a sharp and gloomy voice suddenly came from behind. Qing Yi, you stupid woman. You're being followed. Qing Yi was stunned. She immediately turned her head to look. She saw that a black-clothed man had appeared behind her. His figure was tall and stalwart. His wide black cloak fluttered in the wind. He wore a green mask with fangs on his face. Only his mouth was exposed. His gaze was so fierce that it was enough to make people ignore his terrifying mask and only focus on his eyes. Lord! Qing Yi blurted out. Lord! Han Yunqing's heart jumped. She knew that the masked black-clothed man in front of her must be the leader of the northernly country's spies. He was also the poison master that she had always been curious about. Suddenly, the masked black-clothed man approached. His mysterious black, fiendish eyes stared straight at Han Yunqing. Han Yunqing was shocked. She subconsciously wanted to retreat. Only then did she realize that she was restrained by Qing Yi and couldn't move. You're the one who released the mosquito coils, right? The black-clothed man asked. His voice was so low that it sounded like it came from the depths of hell. Han Yunqing couldn't help but shiver. However, although she was afraid, she was more concerned about the words he just said. He said that Qing Yi was being followed. Could it be that someone really chased after the poisonous mosquito swarm? Who could it be? Seeing that Han Yunqing didn't answer, the masked black-clothed man suddenly lifted her chin. That strength wasn't at all tender and protective of the fairer sex. Han Yunqing only felt that her chin was about to break. Answer this lord's question. His voice was filled with killing intent. Qing Yi at the side was scared. Who knew? Han Yunqing fiercely tilted her chin and said coldly, so what if I am? The masked black-clothed man's hand was clearly a bit stiff. He was just about to get angry. Who knew? Han Yunqing said coldly, the contest between you and Long Fei Yi is based on your own ability. Kidnapping a weak woman like me to threaten others, aren't you ashamed? How dare you? Qing Yi shouted angrily and raised her hand to slap. No one had ever dared to be so impudent to his honor. However, the masked black-clothed man casually flung Qing Yi away and said coldly, useless thing, you can get lost. As he said, he pulled with his big hand and actually forcibly pulled Han Yunqing from Qing Yi's hand into his embrace. Han Yunqing's face heavily hit his chest. Her facial features were in so much pain that she wanted to cry. This embrace was filled with a domineering masculine aura. It was so unfamiliar that it was scary. Han Yunqing angrily raised her head and roared, "Let go of me." However, the masked black-clothed man smiled coldly, Han Yunqing, you're mistaken. This lord didn't intend to threaten Long Fei Yi by kidnapping you. This lord only wants you, that's all. Only wants me, that's all. She didn't know what he meant by this sentence. However, from his pair of eyes that were as dark as midnight, Han Yunqing clearly saw a strong possessiveness. She was really scared. Chapter 119. Han Yunqing was scared, and without thinking, she bit down ferociously on the masked black-clothed man's hand. Seeing this, Qing Yi and the other black-clothed assassins were all stupefied. Although his lord admired Han Yunqing's poison skills and had the intention to nurture Han Yunqing into a capable assassin, but for Han Yunqing to be so presumptuous, there was only death awaiting her. What his honor likes is obedience, absolute obedience. Under everyone's shock, this moment seemed to have frozen, and time seemed to have stopped. Let go. A low and deep voice descended from the sky, concealing the silence before the storm. However, Han Yunqing pretended as if she didn't hear anything and bit down with all her might, hoping that the other party would let go of her. An intense pain came, and a hint of surprise flashed past the masked black-clothed man's eyes. The anger in his eyes actually dissipated, and what replaced it was a playful look that he had never had before. Han Yunqing, are you poisoning me? What kind of poison is this? He actually only noticed it now. Han Yunqing's teeth slightly stiffened, then she immediately let go, raised her head, looked at the masked black-clothed man and admitted, yes, furthermore, you have already been poisoned. Once these words came out, the masked black-clothed man immediately laughed out loud, good. Very good. He was indeed poisoned, and this was the first time that someone was able to poison him. Is it very funny? Han Yunqing said coldly. The poison that she used was a poison that only existed in the modern era, vitamin poison, which was a highly concentrated vitamin. Vitamin was a good thing, but once it was overdosed, it would cause acute poisoning. In light cases, the body's functions would be damaged, and in heavy cases, death. Vitamins naturally existed in ancient plants, but there was no way to extract large amounts of them and make them into poison. Without poison, it also meant that there was no antidote. No matter how powerful this fellow's poison skills were, once he was poisoned, he would be helpless. Right now, he still didn't feel anything, but, after a while, he would definitely be in so much pain that he wished he was dead. Han Yunqing, I am getting more and more interested in you. As the masked black-clothed man said, he raised his hand and actually casually kissed away the blood on the back of his hand. I will bring you back and slowly detoxify you. As he spoke, he grabbed Han Yunqing's waist and carried her over his shoulder. Then, he turned around and left. Han Yunqing kicked and punched him. Let go of me. I'm the only one who can cure your poison. Let me go if you don't want to die. Within an hour, you will definitely die from the poison. You don't know what kind of poison you have, do you? No matter how much Han Yunqing struggled, the masked man still held her captive. Unexpectedly, at this moment, a red shadow suddenly flashed and landed in front of the masked man. He stood in the air, his wide and luxurious red robe fluttering in the wind, like a ball of scorching fire burning in the air. He was like an immortal, like a demon, like a dream, like an illusion. So beautiful. This was Han Yunqing's first thought. When the masked man said that he was being followed, was he referring to this guy? Red Shadow, is he Gu? Just as Han Yunqing was filled with suspicion, Gu teased, "Poison lass, did you miss me?" It really was him. Han Yunqing was overjoyed. She did not expect this guy to be even more beautiful than she had imagined. "Who are you?" the masked man asked coldly. He could tell that this person's martial arts was not low. He knew that Long Fei Ye's men were following behind the poisonous mosquito swarm, but he did not notice the existence of this red-clothed man. "Brother, it's not good to bully a weak girl like this, right?" Gu smiled with a devastatingly beautiful smile. "What does it have to do with you?" The masked man was high and mighty, full of disdain. Unexpectedly, the otherworldly, elegant, and noble Gu suddenly burst out with vulgarities. "It has nothing to do with me, but it's a pity that I don't like you." Courting death. The masked man carried Han Yunqing with one hand and lightly waved his other hand. Then, several darts were shot out. Do. Han Yunqing's detoxification system immediately alerted her that there was poison. "Poison! It's snake powder!" Han Yunqing exclaimed. These darts were just a cover. When the darts were shot out, the air was filled with poisonous snake powder. Once inhaled, one would be poisoned. This method of poisoning was the most difficult to guard against. The masked man was very surprised that Han Yunqing could see through his poison at a glance. However, Gu chuckled. "Poison lass, don't worry. I'm not afraid." Gu held his breath. Then, he pulled out a blood-red whip from his waist and fiercely swung it over. Do. The detoxification system immediately alerted her that there was poison. Moreover, the method of poisoning was the same as the masked man. When the whip was swung out, the poison was also scattered in the air. No wonder Gu was not afraid of the poisonous mosquitoes. It turned out that he was also a poison expert. Han Yunqing was also speechless. How did she meet so many poison experts all of a sudden? One must know that when a poison expert met a poison expert, poison attacks were ineffective. It was a competition of true ability. Child's play. The masked man was very disdainful. He did not dodge the whip. Instead, he suddenly put Han Yunqing down and pushed her to block the whip. Ah! Han Yunqing did not expect this and screamed. Gu had no choice but to change his direction and swung the whip to one side. Seeing this, the masked man pulled Han Yunqing back and tied her up in his arms. "You're not a man." Han Yunqing scolded angrily. The masked man sneered. "Don't worry. He won't dare to hurt you." "You!" Han Yunqing was furious. However, Gu was still smiling. He was not angry. After he withdrew the whip, he did not stop. Then, he swung the whip again. This time, the masked man used Han Yunqing to block the whip again. However, unexpectedly, Gu did not withdraw the whip this time. Swoosh! He whipped Han Yunqing's arm fiercely. Ah! Han Yunqing screamed. She was in so much pain that her internal organs were all shattered. The masked man was surprised as well and gave a start. At the same time, Gu Qishao's whip lashed out again, heading straight for the masked man's mask. At this critical moment, the masked man who did not expect this to happen suddenly retreated. He subconsciously let go of Han Yunqing. Han Yunqing immediately fell down. However, Gu swung the whip again and wrapped it around Han Yunqing. He wanted to pull her over. At this moment, Xing Yi and a few masked assassins in black held their swords and attacked Gu. The assassins surrounded Gu. Xing Yi swung her sword at the long whip. Gu's always smiling peach blossom eyes flashed with a hint of seriousness. He did not pull Han Yunqing anymore. Instead, he instantly closed in. As he withdrew the long whip, he grabbed Han Yunqing's waist. Qingyi's sword missed its target, but at the same time, multiple hidden darts flew in its direction. They weren't aimed at Gu Qishao, but Han Yunqing. You better protect her. The masked man warned as he threw out countless darts. Do. Han Yunqing's detoxification system frantically reminded her. God knows how many poisons were hidden in these darts. Although she was not afraid of poison, there were so many darts that it was impossible to guard against. Gu was one against many and could only protect Han Yunqing as he dodged. Han Yunqing was tightly protected in his arms. She wanted to help but could not. Very quickly, Gu's shoulder was hit by 3 darts. He frowned, feeling that the pain was very strange. However, he did not have time to think about it. Even if he was poisoned, he had to endure it for a while. He endured the pain and swept the long whip to drive Xingyi and the rest back. Taking this opportunity, he immediately fled to the forest behind him. The poisonous mosquito swarm was behind him. Long Fei Yi must also be behind him. It was not worth it to fight against so many. He had to ask for help. Seeing that he was about to leave, the masked man's lips curled into a bloodthirsty smile. The game is over. After saying that, he clenched his fist. Suddenly, Gu felt something tugging on his shoulder. He subconsciously turned his head to look. Only then did he realize that the 3 darts that were deeply embedded in his shoulder were actually connected by 3 threads as thin as spider silk. These were spider darts. The other end of the spider silk was in the masked man's hand. And this end of the spider silk had already been deeply embedded in his body along with the poison. Who was this masked man? He actually had such a top-grade poison weapon. Han Yunqing was also shocked. This was the first time she had seen such a thing. She pulled out the dagger that she had brought along and wanted to cut off those 3 threads of spider silk. But after a few slashes, the thin spider silk actually did not break. What should she do? Han Yunqing couldn't care so much as she stretched out her hand to grab the darts. Who knew that once the darts were pulled out, blood spurted out from Gu's shoulder. What was even more unbelievable was that the spider silk was not pulled out. It was as if it had been implanted into Gu's body. Han Yunqing did not believe in heresy as she used all her strength to pull out the spider silk. At this moment, Gu frowned and said in a deep voice, "Let go. This is poison and it has affected the heart." Once these words were said, Han Yunqing gave a cold humph and immediately let go. Heavens, she had never seen this kind of poison before. Never seen it before, how was she going to detoxify it? And it had gone deep into the heart. If she hurriedly detoxified the poison, Gu would die. She activated the detoxification system to do a deep scan but only found out that Gu's heart had been poisoned by a type of spider poison. But as for what kind of poison it was, the detoxification system could not scan it. The modern poison that she had given the masked man had not even taken effect yet, and the masked man had actually given him a poison that she could not detoxify. Damn it! Han Yunqing suddenly realized that she had underestimated this mastermind behind the scenes. Just as Gu and Han Yunqing were helpless, suddenly, the masked man pulled Gu and Han Yunqing out together. It's over. Unexpectedly, at this moment, a large swarm of poisonous mosquitoes suddenly surged out from the forest and swarmed towards Han Yunqing and Gu. Han Yunqing's hand still had the scent of the mosquito coil. The poisonous mosquitoes had arrived. Controlling the poisonous mosquitoes was the assassin's specialty. Logically, the masked man should be happy, but who knew that he was anxious? He pulled the spider silk fiercely as if he was afraid of the poisonous mosquitoes. Unfortunately, his speed was not as fast as the poisonous mosquitoes. Han Yunqing had stopped releasing the mosquito coil for a long time. Now, only the scent remained on her hand. The poisonous mosquitoes seemed to have smelled the scent of their favorite blood and swarmed towards Han Yunqing crazily. Han Yunqing had forgotten about the poisonous mosquitoes. Seeing this, she immediately activated the detoxification system to release the mosquito coil. If there was no mosquito coil, her hand would become the target of public criticism. Just thinking about it was terrifying. Just as Han Yunqing released the mosquito coil, the dense poisonous mosquitoes instantly enveloped her and Gu. At the same time, they were less than 10 steps away from the masked man. The masked man was still pulling with all his might, but suddenly, Gu's shoulder loosened. The spider silk broke. What happened? Chapter 120. It wasn't only Gu Qishao who sensed the snapping of the strands, but Han Yunqing as well. How could this be? Could it be, the poisonous mosquitoes are the natural enemies of this spider silk? Every poison has its own nemesis. Gu Qishao chuckled and hugged Han Yunqing tightly. Then he turned around in the midst of the mosquito swarm and scattered some sort of poison. In a flash, all of the mosquitoes fled in panic, many of them dying and crashing to the ground. Han Yunqing's detoxification system beeped incessantly. Some reminded her of the poisonous mosquitoes, some reminded her of the poison of the spider darts, and some reminded her that the thing Gu scattered was poisonous. Gu, the reason why this guy wasn't afraid of the poisonous mosquitoes was because he was proficient in fighting poison with poison. Fighting poison with poison, that was quite impressive. When the poisonous mosquitoes scattered, Gu continued to flee forward with Han Yunqing. The masked man, Xing Yi, and the other assassins followed closely. Darts after darts came flying again. Compared to being bitten by the poisonous mosquitoes, Gu would rather spend more effort to dodge the darts of the masked man. As long as they could enter the forest, the darts would be obstructed and they could escape faster. Gu's speed was very fast. Han Yunqing nestled in his arms and could hear his strong and rapid heartbeat. She couldn't imagine that such a gentle and enchanting man's heartbeat could be so masculine. Gu's speed was already fast enough. However, the masked man was also terrifyingly fast. If they hadn't taken the initiative and escaped quickly, they would have been caught. Just as Gu was about to enter the forest, a dart suddenly flew past him and hit a tree trunk. It actually bounced back. What a powerful darting technique! This time, Gu hesitated for a moment and dodged sideways. One must know that in a battle between experts, victory or defeat was often due to a moment of carelessness. It wasn't a matter of strength. While Gu Qishao was lost in thought, the masked man chased after him and grabbed Han Yunqing's arm. Gu Qishao tightened his grip on Han Yunqing's waist and struck out with a palm. The masked man held on to Han Yunqing with one hand while raising his other to block. Han Yunqing hit the masked man's hand with all her might. She even bit down and released the poison. However, the poison didn't seem to have any effect on the masked man. God knows if he was a poison human, poison corpse, or poison parasite. Han Yunqing didn't have time to think about this problem. Her strength was obviously not as great as the masked man. She had an idea and pulled out her dagger to stab, but Qing Yi's long sword came slashing from the side. She was so scared that she immediately let go of her hand, and Qing Yi almost cut off her hand. So terrifying. The green-robed and black-robed assassins arrived one after another, leaving Gu Qishao once again outnumbered. He held on to Han Yunqing tightly with one hand and dealt with the masked man with the other. He couldn't care about Xing Yi and the assassins. Xing Yi's eyes flashed with malice. She turned her sword and stabbed towards Gu's eyes. Gu and the masked man were in a deadlock. Their strength was balanced. If he wanted to escape and dodged Xing Yi's long sword, Gu could only let go of Han Yunqing. But as soon as he let go, Han Yunqing would fall into the masked man's hands. He'd only managed to snatch her away by a fluke, so it was impossible for him to snatch her away from the masked man again when he was outnumbered. What should he do? Xing Yi's long sword was nearing. However, even at this juncture, Gu was still hesitating. Suddenly, Han Yunqing shouted, "Let go." Then she twisted her body and broke free from Gu's hand and kicked him away. Just like that, Gu retreated as Xing Yi's long sword pierced past his eyes. Meanwhile, Han Yunqing was pulled away by the masked man. Everything seemed to be over, but at the same time, there was a sharp sound of something breaking through the air. Whoosh! A sharp arrow pierced through the air and shot towards the masked man's arm. The arrow seemed to contain enough power to split the heavens and earth. It even caused the air around it to tremble violently. The arrow was as fast as lightning falling from the sky. Like a hot knife through butter, it could topple mountains and overturn seas. It was unstoppable. No one had expected this to happen. In a moment of desperation, the masked man decisively withdrew his hand. The sharp arrow brushed past the masked man's sleeve. Even if it didn't hit its target, the masked man was still repelled by the power contained in the arrow. Fine iron crossbow arrow. Xing Yi cried out in alarm. Fine iron was the world's strongest metal. Only Tianning's imperial family possessed it, while the fine iron crossbow arrows were exclusive to Tianning's Duke of Qin. Long Fei Yi had come. Han Yunqing was free of her bindings and plummeted downwards. But when she heard this voice, she instinctively turned her head to look. She saw a tall, proud figure descend from the skies to land behind her. His aura was as noble as a god's, but his face was as calm as a demon's. One hand was behind his back while the other held a crossbow, aiming at the masked man. It's him. Long Fei Yi. He's come. He hadn't given up on her, nor had he disappointed her. He'd chased after the poison mosquito swarm. At this moment, Han Yunqing forgot about her own predicament. Even though she was plummeting, her heart was no longer afraid. Instead, she was inexplicably excited. It was as if this fellow's appearance meant she was safe. Long Fei Yi. The masked man breathed a sigh of relief. He'd been afraid of Long Fei Yi following them from behind, so he'd stepped forward to take Han Yunqing away. Who knew that Gu would interfere and delay things? He should have thought of this earlier. Once the poison mosquito swarm arrived, Long Fei Yi would also arrive. At this moment, the masked man was the closest to Han Yunqing. His ferocious eyes sunk as he ignored the warning of Long Fei Yi's fine iron crossbow and instantly rushed towards Han Yunqing. Swoosh! Another sharp sound pierced through the air. That fine iron crossbow arrow seemed to be able to pierce through heaven and earth as it flew down majestically. God knows how much internal energy Long Fei Yi had poured into this arrow. Everyone was shocked. But the masked man didn't give up. He chased after Han Yunqing while paying attention to the arrow. He was prepared to dodge it at any time. But what was even more unexpected was that once the fine iron crossbow arrow was shot, Long Fei Yi also flew down. His face was as cold as a god's. Seeing this, the masked man's eyes turned cold as he shot out a hidden dart. But he shot out a few more darts. His aim wasn't to hit Long Fei Yi but to poison him. One must know that Long Fei Yi's martial arts were exceptionally strong, but he didn't understand poison. Poison was his weak spot. It's poisonous. Han Yunqing cried out in alarm. At this moment, she was only 3 meters away from the ground. She could fall and shatter into pieces at any moment. The sharp arrow was right in front of the masked man. He had no choice but to dodge and missed the opportunity to grab Han Yunqing's hand. But the powder that he had scattered around Han Yunqing's surroundings. If he couldn't get it, he'd rather destroy it than let Long Fei Yi get it. If Long Fei Yi didn't stop and continued to fly down, he would definitely be poisoned. But who knew that Long Fei Yi didn't care about the poison in the air and flew down at a low altitude. Just as Han Yunqing was about to hit the ground, a strong and powerful arm scooped her up and pulled her into an embrace. Following that, his body spun and his feet landed firmly on the ground. That movement was indescribably elegant. Han Yunqing looked at his perfect and cold side profile. She actually hoped that this dangerous moment would never pass. Seeing that Long Fei Yi didn't care about the poison in the air and saved someone, the masked man was shocked. Could it be that Long Fei Yi wasn't afraid of the poison? At that moment, he couldn't care so much and shouted, "Retreat!" If Long Fei Yi didn't care about the poison, everyone present wouldn't be his match even if they worked together. They had to retreat. At this moment, Gu suddenly attacked Qing Yi. Seeing this, the masked man's figure flashed, pulled apart Qing Yi and threw a hidden dart at Gu. With the previous example, Gu was still somewhat afraid of this hidden dart. He dodged to the side several times. When he was about to give chase, the masked man had already taken Qing Yi and disappeared into the forest at the side. Gu didn't stay idle. With a wave of his long whip, he stopped the remaining assassins. At this moment, Mu Qingguo and guard Shengguan caught up and quickly joined in. Long Fei Yi didn't give chase. His gaze was locked on the masked man in the distance. When he couldn't see the man's back, his brows suddenly tightened and he spat out a mouthful of black blood. The masked man's poison powder didn't have any effect on Gu and Han Yunqing. Han Yunqing was a poison master and didn't need to detoxify the poison immediately. Her immunity was also better than others, so the poison would take a longer time to act up. Gu was an expert in fighting poison with poison, so the poison powder probably wouldn't have any effect on him. However, Long Fei Yi was different. In just a short while, the poison had already acted up. The masked man had scattered too many poisons. Han Yunqing couldn't tell what kind of poison it was. "Let go of me, I'll quickly check," she said hurriedly. Panic was written all over her face, but she didn't even notice it. Long Fei Yi glanced at her flustered little face and didn't say much. He let go of her. Han Yunqing turned to face Long Fei Yi and immediately activated the detoxification system. This scan indicated that there were 3 types of poisons. That damned masked man. Could it be that the poisons in his darts were all different? Seeing the bloodstains on Long Fei Yi's lips, Han Yunqing didn't think much of it. She stood on her tiptoes and reached out her hand. Long Fei Yi pulled her back and said unhappily, "What are you doing?" He was very obsessed with cleanliness. Since he was young, he hated other people touching him, especially his face. "After collecting a blood sample for analysis, I'll be able to determine which of the 3 poisons you have." Han Yunqing was still anxious and didn't think too much about it. Long Fei Yi hesitated for a moment. He lowered his eyes and didn't look at her, but he still slowly let go of her hand. Han Yunqing's pale little face was filled with seriousness. She stood on her tiptoes again and reached out her index finger to gently touch the corner of Long Fei Yi's mouth. She gently wiped away some of the bloodstains. As if it wasn't enough, she gently wiped a few more times. It was a delicate touch. Her fingertips accidentally touched his thin lips. It was soft and itchy. There was an indescribable strange feeling. Long Fei Yi unconsciously looked up at her. However, Han Yunqing's thoughts were all on the poison in Long Fei Yi's body. How could she know how intimate this action was? She was still as serious as ever. After collecting enough blood, she immediately let go. When she let go, Long Fei Yi felt as if he had suddenly lost something. There was an indescribable sense of loss. Damn it! He had always been obsessed with cleanliness. He was even more repulsed by the touch of women. But facing this woman, after he lost his psychological resistance, he actually felt unsatisfied. It wasn't enough. Want to continue? This feeling of losing control made Long Fei Yi feel repulsed. He avoided her gaze and turned to look at Gu. Han Yunqing didn't know what Long Fei Yi was thinking. Once she collected the blood sample, she immediately squatted on the ground and took out the medical bag she carried with her. Chapter 121. On Gu's side, the masked assassins in black fell one by one. Mu Qinggu and guard Shengguan weren't stupid enough to not know that they had to capture them alive. However, these assassins were well trained and knew that they couldn't escape, so they all committed suicide by taking poison. Long Feiyi watched from afar. If it was in the past, he would have lost his temper. Were these people useless if they couldn't even capture them alive? However, at this moment, although he was looking forward, he was absent-minded. After a while, he retracted his gaze and looked at Han Yunqing. He saw Han Yunqing squatting on the ground, fiddling with something in her medical bag. Her pale little face was full of seriousness and solemnity. This wasn't the first time Long Feiyi saw Han Yunqing so serious, but at this moment, he still couldn't look away. This woman's beauty was beyond his expectations, but when she was serious, she surpassed her beauty. Looking at her silently, Long Feiyi unconsciously raised his hand and gently touched the corner of his lips where she had touched just now. Finally, Han Yunqing identified the 3 poisons and found the antidote in the detoxification system that could be taken directly without needing to use acupuncture to expel the poison. She took out 3 pills from her medical bag and manually identified them to ensure that there was no mistake. God knows how nervous and worried she was. If there was one poison in Long Feiyi's body, even if it was one that she didn't know and couldn't detoxify, like the spider dart poison, then Long Feiyi would be in danger. Fortunately, these 3 poisons were considered ordinary to her. She thought that poisons like the spider dart, which were almost weaponized, should be very rare. Once she got the antidote, Han Yunqing suddenly stood up and stretched out her hand. Long Feiyi, here, the antidote. After saying that, she met his deep gaze. The moment their eyes met, Han Yunqing was stunned. She only felt that Long Feiyi's eyes had an unspeakable emotion that touched her heart. What's wrong with him? Her hand was stretched out in front of him. There were 3 pills lying in her fair palm. Her movements froze just like that. Long Feiyi didn't expect this woman to stand up so quickly. His gaze immediately dodged and soon returned to its usual coldness. He glanced at Han Yunqing's palm and asked, "Are you sure it's the antidote?" Han Yunqing looked at him suspiciously and said hurriedly, "I'm sure." "Hurry up and take it. You're already vomiting blood. If you don't take it, I'll have to use a scalpel to expel the poison." Long Fei nodded and swallowed the antidote in one gulp. Seeing him take the antidote, Han Yunqing was completely relieved. She heaved a sigh of relief and patted her chest subconsciously. Long Feiyi looked at him. "What's wrong? What if I couldn't detoxify your poison? That would be terrible." Han Yunqing smiled and said casually. Who knew that Long Feiyi would become serious, and his gaze deepened. "What are you afraid of?" "Afraid that this prince will die." What was she afraid of? Han Yunqing didn't think that much. She was just anxious and afraid. Meeting his questioning gaze, she suddenly felt uncomfortable. She only felt that this guy was very strange and seemed to be a little different from usual. She pursed her lips and said jokingly, "You risked your life to save me. No matter what, I have to save you." Who knew that Long Feiyi would say coldly, "You're thinking too much. This prince only believes that you can detoxify the poison." If he didn't know that she had the ability to detoxify poison, why would Long Feiyi, who cherished his life so much, rush down to save her despite the sky full of poison? After all, what he feared the most was poison. Risking his life to save her. This woman wasn't that valuable to him. Han Yunqing obviously knew that Long Feiyi was certain that she could detoxify the poison, which was why he came down to save her. In fact, she was already very grateful that he discovered the poisonous mosquito swarm and rushed down to save her. She didn't dare to ask for more than that. Ignoring the trace of inexplicable sorrow in her heart, Han Yunqing chuckled. This concubine knows that your highness believes that this concubine can detoxify the poison, so this concubine was afraid that I wouldn't be able to detoxify it and let your highness sacrifice himself in vain. Seeing Han Yunqing smile so brightly and so indifferently, Long Feiyi felt a kind of anger that had nowhere to vent. He originally thought that this proud woman would refute him, but she actually belittled herself. Why did you run to the southern mountains to pick tea for no reason? Long Feiyi changed the topic. If this woman hadn't gone to the southern mountains, the assassins wouldn't have had a chance to make their move and there wouldn't have been so much trouble. I heard that the Red South Peak is good, so this concubine wants to try it. Han Yunqing was still smiling faintly. Long Feiyi looked her up and down and saw the whip wounds on her arms, but he didn't ask. Instead, he said coldly, "Did those assassins say anything? What clues did they leave behind? That masked man is the true mastermind behind the spies, and he's called their master. His left and right arms are called He Sha and Qingyi respectively. They're both women and their mouths are very tight, so I couldn't get anything out of them. I just knew that Qingyi should be the one in charge of all the spies in Tianing. Sister Wen is her direct subordinate, and she was the one who concocted the 10,000 snake poison in the young general's body," Han Yunqing replied seriously. To her, her greatest regret this time wasn't that she couldn't catch the mastermind, but that she couldn't catch Qingyi. Han Yunqing hesitated for a moment, then said, "I suspect Qingyi is hiding in the capital." Han Yunqing knew Mu Qingwu's personality and personally bowed to help him up. "Young general, if I was injured, then I would definitely blame you. Now that I'm fine, you can be considered to have done a meritorious deed for saving the princess consort. Your merits offset your demerits." Mu Qingwu didn't dare to let Han Yunqing help him up and hurriedly stood up. After hesitating for a moment, he could only comply with Han Yunqing's wishes. "Many thanks, Princess Consort. Guard Shengguan, you should also get up," Han Yunqing said. Guard Shengguan worked so hard just to make up for his demerits. He hurriedly stood up and said with a smile, "Princess Consort is truly blessed by the heavens. You were scared but not in danger. The two of us followed His Highness to track down the poisonous mosquito swarm. We wanted to find the nest of those thieves, but it was a pity that we were so close." Hearing this, Han Yunqing's expression froze. She unconsciously looked at Long Feiyi. She had been wondering why no one had chased after them for so many days. So it was because of this. Long Feiyi had discovered the poisonous mosquito swarm long ago, but he didn't make a move the entire time. He wanted to cast a long line to catch a big fish. So, he used her as bait. He treated her like a child and threw her out to catch a wolf. She had foolishly been happy because of his appearance, but who would have thought that it would be like this? This bastard, did he know that if it wasn't for Gu, she would have already been taken away by that black-clothed masked man? Thinking of the black-clothed masked man's sinister words, this senior only wants you, Han Yunqing couldn't help feeling a chill run down her spine. She looked at Long Feiyi and her eyes were filled with resentment. Guard Shengguan was speaking the truth, but Long Feiyi had a cold look at him. Guard Shengguan's face was blank as he felt killing intent all around him. He quickly lowered his head in fear, not daring to look any further. He didn't know where he had gone wrong. "Since it's like this, then I'll have to disappoint your highness," Han Yunqing softly said. Indeed. Long Feiyi was indeed a bit disappointed that he hadn't been able to directly attack the root of the problem this time. He magnanimously accepted Han Yunqing's gaze. Their eyes met, and for some reason, the smell of gunpowder gradually filled the air. At this moment, a light laugh sounded. "Your Highness Duke of Qin, although you didn't directly attack the nest of those people, it can be considered that you've met the main culprit. Congratulations, this is all due to esteemed Wang Fei's efforts." Looking in the direction of the voice, they saw Gu walking over. He was dressed in a red robe that could topple cities and had a brilliant smile that could topple countries. He was simply a great seductive evildoer. Long Feiyi had long noticed the existence of this evildoer dressed in red and knew that this person had saved Han Yunqing. He cold asked, "And who are you?" Before Gu could speak, Guard Shengguan hurriedly stepped forward and respectfully reported, "Your Highness Duke of Qin, this is our Celestial Fragrance Tea Shop's owner, Gu." Celestial Fragrance Tea Shop's owner? Han Yunqing looked at Gu in shock. For a moment, all her questions were answered. So he was the owner of the tea shop. No wonder a complete stranger would save her. This guy must have seen her being kidnapped and chased her all the way here. "Gu greets your Highness Duke of Qin." Gu bowed with clasped hands. Compared to Guard Shengguan's reverence, he appeared to be neither servile nor overbearing. Unexpectedly, Long Fei Yi suddenly questioned coldly, "There was a spy in the Celestial Fragrance Tea Shop that caused Qin Wangfei to be kidnapped. How should he be punished?" Guard Shengguan's face paled at these words. He had always been in charge of the Celestial Fragrance Tea Shop. Up until now, he had been most afraid of His Highness Duke of Qin's condemnation. Although the Celestial Fragrance Tea Shop couldn't be considered harboring an assassin, that Hui Yang was a member of the Celestial Fragrance Tea Shop. He was a spy. Chapter 122. The tense atmosphere lightened with Gu's arrival, but Long Fei Ye's question caused everyone to tense up again. Long Fei Ye wasn't mistaken. It was precisely because Hui Yang had colluded with a mole that those assassins had been able to kidnap Qin Wangfei so easily. "Your Highness Duke of Qin," just as the steward was about to explain, Gu interrupted with a smile, "Your Highness Duke of Qin, this one chased esteemed Wangfei all the way from Nanshan to here to ensure that esteemed Wangfei didn't come to any harm. Is this enough to offset my mistake?" Guard Shengguan hurriedly chimed in, "Your Highness Duke of Qin, it's all thanks to our owner. Otherwise, we would have been a step too late." These words were clearly trying to steal the Duke of Qin's credit. Guard Shengguan was usually a quick-witted person, but in front of His Highness Duke of Qin, he always spoke the truth. At this time, speaking the truth was undoubtedly the same as speaking the wrong thing. Long Fei Yi didn't like to hear it, and his cold gaze grew even colder. Of course, Long Fei Yi couldn't refute the truth. However, he could ignore it. "What's with the injury on her arm?" Long Fei Yi immediately asked. If he hadn't reminded her, Han Yunqing would have forgotten that her arm was injured by Gu. It was also because of this whip that Gu had the opportunity to snatch her away from the masked assassins. This whip was actually worth it. This one was careless and injured it while trying to save someone. Gu was very honest. An injury is an injury. There's no reason for it. Long Fei Yi refuted everything with a single sentence. Gu didn't seem to care. He simply smiled, as if saying, "Do as you please." However, the steward wasn't willing to give up. He hurriedly said, "Your Highness Duke of Qin, I beg you, on account of my master's actions in saving someone, please forgive the Celestial Fragrance Tea Shop." Gu looked indifferent and did not stop Guard Shengguan from begging for mercy. Who knew that Long Fei Ye's next sentence would leave Guard Shengguan speechless? He said, "Rescuing Qin Wangfei is something that should be done. It's not considered a merit, so how can it be offset?" Mu Qinggu listened from the side. He wanted to help Guard Shengguan, but he didn't dare to open his mouth. He had a feeling that His Highness Duke of Qin was in a bad mood because of Guard Shengguan's honest words. Finally, Gu's smiling peach blossom eyes flashed with a trace of malice, but it was hidden as soon as it appeared. He was still smiling like a flower. "Your Highness is right. Is the Heavenly Fragrance Tea House willing to listen to your orders?" He chased after Han Yunqing and saved Han Yunqing for two reasons. Firstly, he was very interested in this woman and wanted to make friends with her. Secondly, he wanted to see who dared to lay an ambush in his Heavenly Fragrance Tea House. As for compensating for his mistakes with merits, he had never thought about it, nor did he need it. The Heavenly Fragrance Tea House was one of his favorite properties in Tianing country. It would be a lie to say that he didn't feel heartache. But no matter how much he liked it, it was just a tea house. He could afford to lose it. But as soon as guard Shengguan heard these words, he cried out, "Your Highness Duke of Qin is a magnanimous man. I beg your Highness Duke of Qin to be lenient. A traitor had caused Qin Wangfei to be kidnapped. This crime was enough to shut down the Heavenly Fragrance tea house and confiscate everything in the national treasury. The owner had invested money in buying the land, but he was the one managing it." Guard Shengguan's heart was bleeding. Unexpectedly, Long Fei said coldly, "Your lordship is already being magnanimous by not investigating the mistakes of you and your servant. Aside from this, your lordship will investigate everything and everyone in the Celestial Fragrance tea plantation to the end." At these words, Gu finally narrowed his eyes. Long Fei wasn't investigating him, but the tea house and its people. Without a doubt, he was investigating his background. What he hated the most was people investigating him. Gu was about to speak when Han Yunqing beat him to it. "Your Highness, if Gu hadn't acted in time, Qinxie would have lost her life long ago. Qinxie doesn't blame the young general, nor does she want to blame anyone in the tea house. Moreover, Gu risked his life to save me just then. He was brave and fearless. Based on this point alone, Qinxie is willing to pardon his crimes." Han Yunqing emphasized the part about risking his life to save Long Fei. Her clear eyes stared straight into Long Fei's, her attitude resolute. No one expected Han Yunqing to open her mouth to plead for leniency. No, to be exact, she wasn't pleading for leniency. She was directly asking for forgiveness. It wasn't clear what had angered Long Fei. His nose trembled slightly as he said coldly, "You don't have the right to ask for forgiveness. Qinxie does. The one who was kidnapped was Qinxie, not your highness." Han Yunqing challenged him on the spot, leaving Mu Qinggu and guard Shengguan dumbstruck. Meanwhile, Gu's lips quirked up as he rejoiced in her misfortune. Even Emperor Tianhui had never challenged Long Fei to his face. Was Han Yunqing pulling on the dragon's whiskers and touching his reverse scale in public? She had guts. If one listened carefully, they'd be able to hear Long Fei clench his fists in his sleeves. His face was still expressionless as he reminded her word by word, "Han Yunqing, everything about you belongs to your lordship. Your authority belongs to me as well. In front of your lordship, you have no right at all." Han Yunqing was afraid of Long Fei, but every time she lost her temper, she forgot her fear. She refused to budge an inch, but gave tit for tat as she retorted word by word, "Qinxie refuses to accept this. Qinxie will enter the palace to see His Majesty and ask him to make a decision." Han Yunqing's brows furrowed in pain, but she didn't cry out. Her face was even paler than before and her eyes were downcast. It wasn't clear whether it was because she was angry or because she really didn't have the strength. She leaned against Long Fei's chest, throwing her entire weight onto him. Finally, at sunset, the furious Long Fei felt a sticky sensation on his hand. He slowed down and looked down. He saw that his hand was tightly wrapped around the whip wound on Han Yunqing's arm. Whether it was her arm or his hand, they were both covered in blood. "Damn it!" Long Fei growled. He immediately landed under a large tree. He let go of Han Yunqing and coldly ordered, "Treat the wound immediately." Unexpectedly, as soon as he let go, Han Yunqing leaned against the tree trunk. She couldn't stand steadily at all and slowly fell to the side. After running around for several days, she was so tired that she didn't dare to close her eyes. In addition, she had just been poisoned with a mess of poisons that had accumulated in her body. Coupled with the pain in her arm, how could her frail body withstand it? She had been stubbornly relying on her mental strength to support herself. Now, she was really, really tired. At this moment, she didn't care about the pain or goo. She just wanted to lie down and have a good sleep. It would be better if she never woke up. Seeing that Han Yunqing ignored him and slowly leaned down, Long Fei urged unhappily, "Did you hear me?" Unexpectedly, as soon as he finished speaking, Han Yunqing really fell to the ground. Long Fei Yi was shocked. Only then did he realize that there was something wrong with this woman. He strode forward and caught her. Han Yunqing looked up slightly at him. Her pale lips curled into a faint smile. It seemed to be self-deprecating and contemptuous. Long Fei Yi felt very uncomfortable looking at her. "What's wrong with you?" Long Fei Yi helped her sit down. His voice was still cold. Han Yunqing leaned against his arm. Her eyes were drooping and almost closed. She let him ask her anything. She didn't look at him or speak. He didn't know if she was ignoring him or she didn't have the energy to do so. "Han Yunqing, say something." Long Fei Ye's cold voice revealed some anxiety. However, Han Yunqing didn't respond. In the dim light, her face was as pale as a dying person. Long Fei Yi hurriedly took her pulse. He still knew the basics of pulse reading. Only now did he realize that this woman was terrifyingly weak. In this situation, if she lost more blood, it would be very fatal. He had already thrown his monstrous anger to the back of his mind. He hurriedly took her medical bag. When he opened it, he realized that this seemingly all-purpose medical bag didn't have many things in it. Other than some medicine that he didn't recognize, there were only some gold needles and gauze. Fortunately, he was a martial arts practitioner, so he carried Jinchuang ointment with him. Long Fei Yi let Han Yunqing lean against the tree trunk and sit steadily. Only then did he help her bandage her wound. However, Han Yunqing was so tired that she couldn't sit still. When Long Fei Yi let go, she fell to the side again. Chapter 123. This woman, why was she trying to be strong for Gu, who she didn't even know? Long Fei Ye's face was full of displeasure, but he still held Han Yunqing with one hand and took off his cloak with the other. Only then did he let her lie down slowly. The extremely exhausted Han Yunqing felt as if she was in a bed the moment she touched the ground. She closed her eyes without a care for anything else, as if she was sleeping, as if she was unconscious. "Hey! Han Yunqing!" Long Fei Yi pushed her a few times, but she still didn't respond. His handsome brows unconsciously furrowed. He couldn't care less and first helped her stop the bleeding. Although his complexion wasn't very good, Long Fei Ye's hands were very careful and gentle. No one knew that the aloof and cold His Highness Duke of Qin could be so gentle when treating your injuries. If Han Yunqing hadn't fainted, she would have been so nervous that she couldn't breathe, just like last time when he rubbed her feet. Unfortunately, she was already unconscious. The whip wound on her arm wasn't shallow. Her clothes were rolled up into the wound and mixed with the flesh and blood. It was a shocking sight. However, this kind of injury was nothing to Long Fei Yi. However, he still carefully removed the clothes that were rolled up in the flesh and blood, as if he was afraid that Han Yunqing would feel pain. He glanced at her from time to time, and only continued when he saw that she was quiet. After treating the wound, applying medicine and bandaging it to stop the bleeding, he finally finished before the sky turned dark. It was already winter, and in this deep forest, it was even colder at night. Long Fei Yi started a fire. After hesitating for a long time, he still picked up Han Yunqing and let her sleep in his arms. Although there was a cloak on the ground, it was still cold. Han Yunqing, who had originally been curled up, was snuggled into his warm embrace. She actually opened her eyes in a daze. Long Fei Yi looked down from above, his voice cold without a trace of warmth. "Awake?" Han Yunqing looked at him and then looked around. She only felt that her head was heavy and throbbing. After a while, she came to her senses and understood what was going on. Once she understood, she struggled to get up, but Long Fei Yi held her down and said coldly, "You're so weak. Do you still want to die?" Han Yunqing glanced at her arm and chuckled. "I don't want to." Lie down obediently if you don't want to die. Long Fei Ye's expression was not pleasant. He turned his gaze away and looked into the darkness ahead. Unexpectedly, Han Yunqing suddenly cried out and spat out a mouthful of black blood before coughing violently. You're poisoned. Long Fei Yi was shocked. He never thought that Han Yunqing, a detoxification expert, would also be poisoned. However, the symptoms of his previous poisoning were also spitting out black blood. He was very sure that this was poisoning. Han Yunqing's already pale face became even paler. Her entire body was as weak as a thin piece of paper. If not for Long Fei Yi holding her in his arms, she would probably have been blown away by the wind. She was a detoxification expert. If she was poisoned, she would be able to detoxify it almost immediately. However, she gave that, almost immediately, to him and forgot about herself. Medicine, bring me my medical kit. Han Yunqing said weakly. Long Fei Yi immediately took the medical kit and poured out all the medicine inside. He asked in a deep voice, which one? Which one? Looking at the bottles and jars on the ground, Han Yunqing suddenly wanted to cry. There was no antidote in the medical kit. She only wanted to use the medical kit as a cover to reach into the space of the detoxification system to get the antidote. This guy poured out all the medicine. How was she going to get it? Bastard! I really didn't want to meet you. Han Yunqing wanted to cry but had no tears. Long Fei Yi angrily shouted at her, which one? Tell me. His anger could not hide his anxiety. Han Yunqing laid in the crook of his arm and looked up at his cold and handsome face. She was dizzy. Suddenly, she asked without thinking, Long Fei Yi, you used me as bait to lure the enemy. What if I got bitten? She was overjoyed that he came to save her. If he came to use her as bait to catch a big fish, she would rather he not come. Anyway, she thought that he wouldn't come at that time. The most hateful thing in the world was to give someone hope and then disappoint them. Long Fei never expected Han Yunqing to ask such a question. He looked at her and gave a start, but quickly recovered his wits. I won't, he said mildly. No what? Han Yunqing asked again. Her drowsy eyes were covered with a layer of mist. She looked pitiful and lovely. Long Fei Yi looked at her, but he did not have any tender feelings for the fairer sex. He suddenly said angrily, where is the antidote? Startled, Han Yunqing's hazy eyes immediately vanished as she woke up 70% of her senses. Damn it! What kind of question did she ask? Where is the antidote? Long Fei Yi asked again in a low voice. He was on the verge of exploding. Let me think about it. Han Yunqing answered timidly. It was as if he was the one who was poisoned and not her, so she was in a hurry to get the antidote. Her so-called think was, of course, activating the detoxification system. Han Yunqing thought about it and tried hard to concentrate. If it were any other time, it would just take some effort. However, at this time, she was exhausted and had a hard time doing it. She had no choice but to close her eyes. Seeing this, Long Fei Yi panicked again. What's wrong? I'm thinking. Han Yunqing was suffering but could not say it out loud. Long Fei knitted his brows, not daring to disturb her any further. Han Yunqing thought it over for a while before she finally focused her attention on activating the detox system. A few bottles of pills were placed in her hands, which she hid in her sleeves. One had to know that this was a few bottles of pills, not just a few pills. God knows how much energy Han Yunqing had to spend. In short, once the pills were in her hand, she almost fainted again. Seeing her slowly open her eyes, Long Fei Yi, who was always strong and had limited patience, did not rush her. He looked at her with concern and did not say a word. Seeing him like this, Han Yunqing could not help but laugh. She felt that she was so tired that her brain must have been damaged. She actually saw anxiety and concern in this cold-blooded guy's eyes. The pills are all hidden in my sleeve. One bottle, one pill, she said tiredly. Long Fei-yi hurriedly looked for the pills and really took out a few small porcelain bottles from her sleeve. Hiding pills in one's sleeve was a very normal thing. Long Fei-yi did not suspect much and poured out one pill from each bottle according to her instructions. There were a total of 6 pills. Long Fei-yi's hand came close to Han Yunqing's mouth. He did not realize that his voice had become much gentler. Open your mouth. Han Yunqing was dizzy and did not think much before opening her mouth. Unexpectedly, Long Fei-yi hurriedly poured all 6 pills into her mouth. Han Yunqing was not afraid of bitter pills, but she was most afraid of swallowing them. Her ability to swallow pills was even weaker than a 3-year-old child's. Every time she took pills, she had to swallow them one by one with full concentration. She was not good at it in the first place. In addition, she almost did not even have the strength to breathe at this time. How could she swallow all 6 pills at once? The pills were stuck in her throat. Her face turned purple, and she suddenly coughed violently and retched repeatedly. Long Fei-yi did not expect this. He hurriedly let her lie down on her side and patted her back anxiously. Han Yunqing was so uncomfortable that her tears fell. One had to know that the size of these 6 pills was equivalent to the size of 6 modern capsules. She retched with all her might. It was as if she was vomiting with her life. After a while, she finally vomited out all 6 pills before she choked to death. Phew! After heaving a sigh of relief, Han Yunqing's tears also fell drop by drop. At this time, she did not have any strength left. She felt like a balloon with all the air sucked out of her body. She lay on her side in the crook of Long Fei-yi's arm. Her head and eyes were lowered. Her eyes were empty. It was really uncomfortable. Long Fei-yi, you bastard. Are you saving people or trying to murder them? Haven't you fed a patient medicine before? Who knew that at this time, she heard Long Fei-yi's disdainful voice, why are you so stupid? The exhausted Han Yunqing wished that she could kill this fellow with her gaze. Unfortunately, she did not even have the strength to glare at him. She just lay there with her head hanging down. Long Fei-yi had never taken care of anyone before, especially a woman. How would he know how delicate a woman's body was? He gently patted Han Yunqing's back. Seeing that she had stopped vomiting, he poured out another 6 pills, get up and swallow them one by one. But Han Yunqing did not move. She was so weak that she did not even have the strength to lift her head. Long Fei-yi picked up her head, if you don't take the medicine, the poison will take effect and you will die. Don't blame Ben Wang for not saving you. Who knew that Han Yunqing's small head would softly slide down from his hand? At this time, Long Fei-yi finally realized the seriousness of the situation. This woman was so weak that it was frightening. Long Fei-yi's heart flashed with a sense of fear that even he was unfamiliar with. In a panic, he immediately sent out a palm of true qi and poured it into Han Yunqing's back. But who knew that after this palm of true qi was poured in, Han Yunqing would spit out 3 mouthfuls of black blood. Long Fei-yi then realized his mistake. This woman was already poisoned. If he poured his true qi into her, it would speed up the blood circulation and it would undoubtedly speed up the poison's reaction. He had always been calm and had never made such a mistake in a panic. What was going on this time? In order to transfer his true qi to her, he had to first remove the poison in her body. A trace of irritation flashed across his handsome face. Long Fei-yi was still patient. He took out a pill and was about to stuff it into Han Yunqing's mouth. But very quickly, he stopped. He was afraid that if he used too much strength, this woman would vomit it out again. Helpless, he could only place the pill in his palm and put it close to her mouth. Eat it yourself. One pill at a time. That palm of true qi caused the poison to run amok in Han Yunqing's body. At the same time, it also made her more energetic. She looked at the medicine in Long Fei Ye's palm and slowly raised her head. Seeing this, Long Fei Yi immediately carefully supported her. Antidote Ah, her life-saving antidote Ah. Han Yunqing was actually more anxious than Long Fei Yi. But she was really frightened earlier and did not dare to let Long Fei Yi feed her again. She forced herself to support herself. Tilting her head, she leaned close to his hand. Her orchid breath poured into his palm. It was soft and fluffy and indescribably comfortable. Then, Han Yunqing stretched out her small tongue and gently rolled up a pill. Inadvertently, the soft tip of her tongue swept across Long Fei Ye's palm. Long Fei Yi could not help but feel his body and mind sway. He felt a numb feeling spread from his palm to his entire body. Han Yunqing forced herself to swallow the pill and leaned over again. Her soft tongue once again rolled up Long Fei Ye's palm. Long Fei Yi unconsciously tensed up. He felt an indescribable sense of loss. By the time Han Yunqing took away the pills for the third time, Long Fei was already on the verge of losing all his self-control. This was simply torture, but he still felt a little fascinated by the feeling. This tormenting little demoness. If this went on, the self-control that he had been proud of all these years would definitely collapse. Finally, he could not hold it in anymore. He withdrew his palm and said in a low voice, "I'll feed you." Han Yunqing looked at him, her eyes filled with fear. "One pill at a time. Eat it yourself," Long Fei Yi said patiently. Then, without waiting for Han Yunqing's consent, he took the pill and stuffed it between her tightly shut lips. Han Yunqing saw the veins on his forehead bulging and thought that this impatient guy was angry again. She did not dare to refuse and obediently ate the pill. One pill at a time, he finally swallowed all 6 pills without a hitch. Chapter 124. Han Yunqing took 6 antidotes. After the antidotes took effect, Long Fei Yi transferred 3 streams of true energy to her. Every time the true qi entered her body, Han Yunqing felt refreshed and refreshed. It was as if she'd been instantly filled with blood. Unfortunately, she was still too tired, so this feeling only lasted for a moment. After 3 streams of true energy, her pulse wasn't that weak anymore. However, her body still didn't have much strength. She was paralyzed in the crook of Long Fei Ye's arm. She didn't even bother to move her eyelids. Long Fei Yi didn't move either. His arm bore all of her strength. The surroundings were silent. The flames of the bonfire jumped. The wind under the tree wasn't strong, but they could hear the whistling of the wind in the distance. Tonight, it looked like they would have to spend the night here. After a while, Long Fei Ye's handsome brows returned to their usual calmness. He looked at Han Yunqing, who was lying on her side in the crook of his arm. His eyes flashed with a trace of complexity, as if he was thinking about something. As for Han Yunqing, once the poison in her body was cured, she was relieved to completely hand herself over to Long Fei Yi. Her eyelashes fluttered a few times and her eyes slowly closed. She fell asleep. As for the matter with Gu, it seemed that the 2 of them had forgotten about it. Neither of them took the initiative to mention it since the afternoon. As the night deepened, Long Fei Yi slowly recovered from his own world. Seeing Han Yunqing sleeping so peacefully, he subconsciously reached out to brush away the strands of hair that had fallen on her cheek. However, when he touched her hair, his fingers suddenly froze. After pausing for a while, he didn't continue and withdrew his hand. He didn't like this strange feeling of losing control. Once he withdrew his hand, he put Han Yunqing down and let her lean against the tree trunk to sleep. He was also sleepy and didn't have the habit of sleeping with a woman. Just as he was about to climb up the tree, he stopped as he remembered something. He checked Han Yunqing's ankle and found traces of dried blood on the gauze. Troublesome. Long Fei had lost count of how many times he'd knitted his brows tonight. He'd just taken out some medicine from his medical pouch and carefully changed the dressing on Han Yunqing's wounds again. After he finished, it was already the middle of the night. Han Yunqing wrapped herself in the cloak and slept soundly. Seeing this, Long Fei gently smiled. He really didn't know why this woman didn't have any vigilance. Wasn't she afraid that he would leave her in the wilderness? He looked down on such a thoughtless woman. When Han Yunqing woke up the next morning, she found herself leaning against a large tree trunk. The fire in front of her had long been extinguished. She was draped in Long Fei's cloak, but he was nowhere to be seen. Where was he? Her head was still a bit dizzy. After she vomited out the 6 pills last night, she was in a semi-conscious state. She only remembered that Long Fei had given her 3 streams of true energy. As for how she ate the 6 antidotes and how she fell asleep, she had completely forgotten. She tried to stretch her arms and found that the wounds on her arms had been treated, and they were treated quite well. Well, she didn't seem to remember what had happened before she took the medicine. Her body was recovering quite well. It seemed that the 3 streams of true energy from last night were still useful, but they took effect rather slowly. She stood up to stretch her muscles and bones while looking around. She didn't notice that her ankle, which hadn't fully recovered, was already completely healed. No matter how she stepped on it, it didn't hurt. Long Fei rested his head on his hands and reclined on the tree trunk. With this woman sleeping under a tree in the wilderness, how could he sleep peacefully? He didn't sleep the entire night. Seeing that the sun had risen, he had just closed his eyes for a while when he was woken up. Cold, he squinted his eyes and didn't make a sound. After Han Yunqing stretched her muscles and bones and confirmed that she was fine, her first reaction was to look up at the tree. Immediately, she saw Long Fei staring at her. How did this woman know that he was in the tree? Long Fei didn't expect this. After looking at her for a moment, he said cold, "You're awake." Han Yunqing nodded. She knew that this guy wouldn't abandon her. If he wasn't in the tree, he must be nearby. Last night. Thank you. Although she was tormented to death, in the end, it was this guy who saved her. Long Fei didn't pay attention to her thanks. He landed gracefully from the tree and said cold, "Return to the capital." It was time to return to the capital. Although he didn't directly attack the trader's nest this time, at least he managed to interrogate a jar of tea leaves at the Celestial Fragrance Tea House. Long Fei was still looking forward to the results of the examination. His words reminded Han Yunqing. She was suddenly shocked and grabbed Long Fei excitedly. "What time is it today?" Heavens! How could she forget about the bet? She didn't even know how long she had been unconscious in the cave, let alone remember how many days she had been kidnapped. When she went to the Celestial Fragrance Tea House with Mu Qinggu, there were only 12 days left until the bet with Mu Luiyue. How many days had passed since then? She wouldn't lose because she missed the bet, right? Long Fei frowned and looked at Han Yunqing's hand. He suddenly said sternly, "Let go." So fierce. Han Yunqing immediately let go. She didn't like to pull and pull with this guy. She was too anxious and her hand slipped. "I'm 14 today." Long Fei still answered her. Upon hearing that it was 14, Han Yunqing heaved a huge sigh of relief. Thank goodness, thank goodness. She had almost been scared to death. The bet with Mu Luiyue ended on the 19th. Today was only the 14th. Counting from start to finish, there were still 6 days left. Yesterday, Long Fei had rushed through the forest like a madman. With his speed, he should be able to return to the capital in 1 or 2 days. Han Yunqing silently counted the time. Long Fei impatiently said, "Are you going or not?" "Yes." Han Yunqing immediately answered. Long Fei glanced at her unhappily before grabbing her by the waist. Just like yesterday, they began to weave through the forest again. Han Yunqing felt that the strength around her waist was rather heavy. She couldn't understand why the guy who had ordered her to let go of him in disgust was holding her so tightly now. What kind of weird misophobia was this? Last night, in a daze, he didn't seem so fierce. He really was a big ice cube whose mood kept changing. Stealing a glance, Han Yunqing saw Long Fei Ye's cold and resolute profile. She couldn't help but bite her lip. Was she still going to talk about Gu's matters? He hadn't argued with her since yesterday, so what did he mean by that? Was he going to insist on punishing the Celestial Fragrance tea shop, or go along with her wishes? If he insisted on punishing the tea shop, he'd probably say a few harsh words to her. After all, she really did threaten him with her words before. If he went along with her wishes, then fine. Han Yunqing immediately rejected the idea as soon as it appeared in her head. She'd rather believe that the sun would rise from the west than believe that this guy would obey her wishes under her threats. Although, he seemed to have obeyed her once or twice, the situation this time was different. Just what kind of attitude did this guy have? After being threatened, he took her away without a word. What did he mean by that? No matter his attitude towards the Celestial Fragrance tea shop, she'd used Emperor Tianhui to threaten him in front of everyone. That was enough to make her suffer the consequences. There was no reason for this guy not to settle accounts with her. Actually, Han Yunqing had only been angry because Gu had used her as bait yesterday. She was smart enough to tell that Gu didn't really want to save her, but wanted to use her as bait to uncover the true mastermind behind the scenes. Otherwise, Gu would have saved her long ago in the cave, wouldn't he? Now that her anger had subsided, Han Yunqing felt both fear and regret when she thought back to yesterday's crazy threats. Conflicted, she stole another glance at Long Fei Yi, only to feel the cold aura emanating from his face. In the end, she lowered her head. If he didn't bring up this matter, could she just treat it as a bygone matter? As for the Celestial Fragrance tea shop, Gu could go there on his own. Long Fei Ye's speed was truly fast. By the afternoon of 2 days later, they'd reached Tianning's capital city and rode a carriage into the city from the west gates. Long Fei closed his eyes to take a nap while Han Yunqing snuggled lazily. She decided to ignore everything else when they got back and eat some hot food first. Then she'd soak in a comfortable hot bath to wash away the stench of bad luck. Unexpectedly, the carriage stopped before it even reached the gates of the Duke of Qin's estate. What's going on? Long Fei Yi immediately opened his eyes. Through the curtains, the driver's tone was a little anxious. Your Highness, something seems to have happened up ahead. A large group of people are running forward. Take a detour, take the back. Long Fei Yi disliked crowds the most. So speaking, he closed his eyes again. Even if his body was made of iron, he'd still get tired. The driver quickly turned the carriage around and took a detour to the back gates of the Duke of Qin's estate. Han Yunqing lifted the curtains and looked outside, only to see the commoners on the streets running forward excitedly to join in the fun. She didn't take it to heart, but stole a glance at Long Fei Yi before continuing to snuggle up lazily. But by the time they reached the back gates, they realized that it was the Duke of Qin's estate that was in trouble. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqing had hardly entered when Steward Xia came running over. Your Highness, esteemed Wang Fei, you're finally back. Something's happened. Something big has happened. Steward Xia's anxiousness made Han Yunqing's heart thump against her chest. What's the matter? Speak properly. Long Fei Yi was very calm, without any fluctuations in his emotions. Steward Xia looked at Han Yunqing. Although he was in a difficult position, he still anxiously said, the Han family's Madame Su came to seek an audience with esteemed Wang Fei. This servant said that esteemed Wang Fei wasn't in the estate and told her to come another day, but who knew that she would cause a ruckus at the door. She said that esteemed Wang Fei must see esteemed Wang Fei today and wouldn't leave. She also said esteemed Wang Fei, she. Before Steward Xia could finish, Han Yunqing immediately screamed and rushed to the front gates without another word. She knew what was going on. Damn it! After being kidnapped this time, she was physically and mentally exhausted. She even almost forgot about the bet, so how could she still remember the 10-day appointment with Madame Su? When she first went to the Han estate, Madame Su and the rest didn't believe that Han Kangen had given her the storehouse key for safekeeping so she could choose a successor. They forced her to hand over the key, so she agreed to let them see Han Kangen 10 days later. Actually, meeting Han Kangen was as easy as turning over a hand, but she only wanted Madame Su and the rest to wait a little longer. Who knew that she'd be kidnapped? Today was the 16th, one day after the 10-day appointment. She'd missed the appointment. But even her father, the Minister of Appointments, didn't dare to run to the Duke of Qin's gates to make a ruckus, to say nothing of a trifling Madame Su. There had to be a powerful figure backing her up, or else she wouldn't be so arrogant. Han Yunqing didn't have time to think about the person behind the scenes. She had to see Madame Su immediately, or else the news would spread all over the city. But as soon as Han Yunqing left the courtyard, she saw Murong Wanru supporting Grand Concubine Yi from the other side. Grand Concubine Yi's well-maintained face was pulled longer than a horse's. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.